Part 1. My first night at Wonderland was not the start anyone would wish for. My name is Michael Hartley, and I've been working here for, well, I can't even remember anymore. Time passes strangely when you work in a place that never sleeps, a place where the daytime laughter of visitors gives way to other things at night. Wonderland, the world's most famous amusement park, with millions lining up each year to experience its magic. But magic isn't the word I'd use to describe what happens after the sun goes down. No one knows about the secret aquarium hidden beneath the main gate. No one, except the security staff and the things that live within it. I remember that Saturday night vividly. The clock struck 1:00 a.m. and the cheerful music from the mushroom-shaped speakers finally fell silent. I was assigned to check the lighting system under the aquarium. Mr. Jones, the colleague who was supposed to accompany me, had called in sick at the last minute. "Just a quick check," Chief Carter Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. "Go down there, check the electrical system, make sure everything's working, then come back up." "Nothing complicated," I nodded, even though he couldn't see me through the radio. "Understood, just a few minutes, right?" A brief silence before Morrison replied, "Yes, just a few minutes." The door leading down to the aquarium was hidden beneath a fake grass mat behind the ticket counter. I used a key to unlock the heavy padlock and pulled up the hatch. The stench of damp, fishy air immediately assaulted my nostrils. An iron staircase led down into the darkness below. Weak red LED lights flickered along the steps. "The lights are already failing," I muttered, switching on my flashlight. If only I had known what awaited me, perhaps I would have turned around and left the park. The moment I stepped onto the last stair, I entered a long, dim corridor. On either side were colossal fish tanks, casting a faint blue glow from within, creating grotesque shadows on the cold concrete floor. This wasn't the aquarium visitors saw. This was where creatures deemed unsuitable for display by management were kept. I walked slowly, the sound of my boots echoing eerily against the concrete. Something felt wrong. Although the tanks were lit, I couldn't see any creatures inside. In theory, there should have been all kinds of fish from all over the world here, species too ugly or too unusual for display. I stopped in front of a control panel mounted on the wall. This was where I needed to check. Opening the metal cover, I began inspecting the circuit breakers, ensuring everything was in its proper place. And then I heard it. Breathing, not my own. A ragged, intermittent gasp, as if someone or something was struggling to breathe through a layer of liquid. I stood motionless, a cold dread creeping up my spine. The breathing seemed to come from everywhere. No, not everywhere. It was coming from inside the fish tanks. "Is anyone there?" I called out, knowing it was a foolish question. There was no one here but me. The concrete floor beneath me vibrated slightly, not like an earthquake, but as if something was pounding from below. I turned, sweeping my flashlight along the thick glass wall of the largest tank. The water rippled gently, and then a shadow darted past. Too fast to see clearly, but large enough not to be an ordinary fish. "It's just an illusion," I told myself, trying to calm down. Tiredness and the dim light are playing tricks on my eyes. But then that smell hit me. The strong, fishy odor of fish oil mixed with the putrid smell of decaying animal carcasses. My stomach churned, and I had to cover my nose with my hand. The scent grew stronger, as if its source was moving closer to me. At the end of the corridor was a small door with a staff-only sign. That was where the main control panel, the one I needed to check, was located. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door. It swung open, and a blast of frigid air rushed out. I stepped into the small room, sweeping my flashlight around the damp walls. The room looked like a miniature pump station, cluttered with pipes and control valves. As I turned to close the door, my hand brushed against something cold, wet, and moving. Terror erupted within me as I spun around. My flashlight beam landed squarely on the thing standing right in the doorway. In that brief moment, I saw it, a hand, not a human hand. Fingers, abnormally long, tipped with jagged claws, encrusted with bits of rusted metal and sea debris. The skin was pale gray-blue with cracks like old bark. I screamed, backing away until my back hit the wall behind me. The hand vanished into the darkness. I heard the drip of water and then laughter. A child's giggle, but fractured, like sound from a broken radio. In my panic, my mind suddenly flashed back to my mother, the woman who had drowned 20 years ago when I was a child. We were at the beach, and she had swum out too far. I remembered standing on the shore, crying, watching her wave one last time before disappearing beneath the waves. Why was I remembering that now? I tried to move, but my feet felt frozen. As I struggled to budge, the light suddenly cut out. Not my flashlight, but the emergency lighting system of the entire aquarium. Darkness enveloped me, leaving only the weak beam of my flashlight. "Is anyone there?" I called out loudly, knowing full well there was no one here to help me. "Morrison, can you hear me?" The radio only crackled, no reply. My flashlight's beam began to dim. The batteries were dying. In desperation, I turned, deciding to run back to the stairs no matter what, but as I turned, I saw her standing there. A woman, drenched from head to toe, water dripping, forming small puddles at her feet. Long black hair obscured her face, but I knew who it was. How could I forget my mother? "Mom," I whispered, disbelieving my eyes. She slowly lifted her head, her hair parting to reveal her face. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't human. The face was deathly pale, lacking eyes, only deep black hollows and an unnaturally wide mouth, and rows of sharp, layered teeth. My heart felt like it stopped. Not from fear, but truly stopped. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my heart. The creature advanced towards me, each step leaving a black, watery footprint on the concrete floor. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't scream. When it was just a step away, I looked over its shoulder and realized a horrifying truth. The door was gone. Only a bare, damp wall remained. No way out. The creature bent down, its eyeless face close to mine. Its lips moved, and a sound escaped, not from its mouth, but seemingly from the very air around us. "Son, Mother has found you." And then all went black. They found me the next morning, huddled in the corner of the maintenance room. No sign of the creature, no puddles of water, nothing unusual. The doctors said I'd had a mild heart attack. Strange for a healthy 32-year-old man like me. I quit Wonderland after that incident. At least I tried to. But no matter where I go or what I do, I always feel it watching me. Sometimes, on rainy nights, I still hear that childish giggle and smell the pungent odor of the sea. And when I look in the mirror, I swear I can see another face reflected behind me. An eyeless face with an unnaturally wide, toothy smile. Wonderland Amusement Park still operates normally every day. Thousands of visitors still queue at the gate, completely unaware that beneath their feet, in that secret aquarium, creatures await, waiting for the next night's security guard to go down there alone. And I still go back to work, not because I need the money, but because I know that if it's not me, it will be someone else. And perhaps that person won't be as lucky as I was to survive. Or perhaps, deep down, I know that a part of me never left that aquarium that night. Part 2. That night was a Tuesday, nearly 3:00 a.m. The sky was moonless and starless, a dense blackness. I remembered every detail, how the artificial light from the street lamps cast strange shadows on the ground, how the night air seemed thick, carrying the smell of stale popcorn and the eerie stillness only an abandoned amusement park could possess. The VR cinema, one of Wonderland's newest attractions, was located in the furthest corner of the park. A semicircular building with a reflective glass facade designed to look like a magical hat. By day, it sparkled in the sun. By night, it was like a black hole, sucking in all surrounding light. I was assigned to check this area every night. According to the schedule, the VR cinema only operated from midnight to 2:00 a.m., a strange phenomenon no one in management could explain. Technicians said the system self-activated at that time, playing short films of jungles, oceans, and other natural environments. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., it would shut down. It was 3:10 a.m. In theory, everything should have been off long ago. I stood before the automatic glass doors, looking inside. The darkness was as thick as ink. My radio crackled as I reported my position. "Hartley at the VR cinema, starting inspection." No reply, just dry static. I paid it no mind. The radio signal was always weak in this area for some reason. The glass doors slid open as I swiped my staff card. A cold gust of wind blew out from inside, carrying a strange scent, the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves. I frowned. This smell didn't belong in a cinema. Inside, empty seats were arranged in an arc, all facing a colossal screen at the front. I immediately saw the problem. The screen was still on. Instead of displaying the usual Wonderland logo when off, it was showing a scene of a dense jungle. There was no sound, just slow-moving images of leaves rustling in the wind. "That's odd," I muttered, heading towards the control panel on the wall. It should have been off an hour ago. When I was halfway there, a gust of wind suddenly picked up. Not from the air conditioning system, but a real, strong gust, carrying the smell of damp vegetation and the rustling of leaves. I stopped dead, feeling the hairs on my neck stand up. Wind couldn't blow inside a sealed building. It was impossible. But I felt it on my skin, whipping my uniform coat, and the smell was too real, too vivid. I turned back to the screen. The jungle scene was no longer moving slowly. It was changing, growing darker and darker, as if the sun was setting rapidly in that virtual world. Shadows crept between the trees, and I could have sworn I saw figures moving within them. It's just a movie, I told myself, trying to calm down, just advanced VR technology. I continued towards the control panel but stopped when I noticed something strange. The cinema had 50 seats, all empty, except for one in the very last row in the furthest corner. I couldn't see clearly in the darkness, but there seemed to be a shape sitting there. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the large space. "This area is closed. You're not allowed here." No reply. I pulled out my flashlight and shone it towards the seat. No one was there. I breathed a sigh of relief, assuming my eyes had played tricks on me. But then, just as I was about to turn away, the seat moved. It bounced as if someone had just stood up, then dropped back down as if a weight had settled on it. My heart pounded in my chest. I stood motionless, flashlight still pointed at the empty seat. Nothing, just a normal red velvet chair. And then the sound began. No longer the wind or the rustling leaves, it was a scream. A long, mournful scream like the wail of a tormented soul. It wasn't coming from the sound system, but seemed to emanate from within my very chest. The background music from the screen transformed into this primal shriek, echoing throughout the entire space. I had to cover my ears, but it was no use. The sound seemed to pierce through my skin, straight into my brain. The screen flickered. The jungle scene vanished, replaced by static. Just for a moment, then a new image appeared. A face. A distorted, warped face as if looking through cracked glass. Empty, black eyes and a mouth. Oh God, that mouth, it was too wide, too long for a human face, and it was looking directly at me. Not at the camera, but at me. I knew it was looking at me. The lips of the face on the screen began to move. No sound, but text appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Please help me." I swept my flashlight around the room, trying to find a light switch, but there was no other light apart from the screen and my flashlight. From behind a row of seats, a steam pipe began to hiss softly, and a thin white mist crawled across the floor. I began to back away towards the exit. The scream still echoed, growing louder, more agonizing. The face on the screen was now bleeding from its eyes and mouth. Black streams of blood flowed down like tears. "Please save me," it continued to mouth. I was almost at the door, just a few steps away. Suddenly, the light from the screen went out, leaving complete darkness. The scream also stopped, leaving only my heavy breathing. I stood there trembling, waiting for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. My flashlight was still working, but its light seemed swallowed by the surrounding gloom, only illuminating a small area in front of me. And then I saw it, a shadow, not on the wall or on the floor, but on the screen. Even though the screen was off, it still reflected a shadow, my shadow. But that wasn't all. There was another shadow standing behind me. I spun around, shining my flashlight behind me. Nothing. No one was there. Turning back to the screen, I still saw two shadows, me and something standing behind me, a head taller than me with unnaturally long, dangling limbs. In a moment of madness, I raised my hand. My shadow on the screen also raised its hand, but the other shadow didn't move. It just stood there, its head slightly tilted, as if observing me. Then it opened its mouth. A deep, dark void opened on that shadowy face, and from it the scream erupted again. This time louder, more painful, closer. I ran. I ran through the automatic glass doors, down the corridor, across the central plaza, not daring to look back. The scream followed me, fading, fading, until I reached the main security office and slammed the door shut. "Hartley, are you all right?" Morrison asked, looking at me with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. I just stood there, gasping, trying to slow my pounding heart. "The cinema," I finally managed to say. "Something's wrong there." Morrison looked at me strangely. "The cinema, it's been closed since last month. After that fire, it was sealed off. No one's allowed in." I looked at him, unable to believe my ears. "No, I was just there. I was checking it according to the schedule." Morrison shook his head, pointing to the schedule tacked on the wall. "There's no cinema on the inspection schedule, Hartley. It burned down after a patron died in it. Don't you remember? I couldn't answer. How could I explain that I had just been in a building that no longer existed? How could I tell him about the face on the screen, about the shadow standing behind me, about that scream? "You should get some rest," Morrison said, patting my shoulder. "Perhaps you're tired and confused." I nodded, reluctantly agreeing, but I knew what I had seen, heard, felt. And the next night, as I passed by that area, I saw the charred ruins of the VR cinema. It had been completely gutted, leaving only a steel frame and a pile of ashes. But the strangest thing was, from those ruins, I could still hear the scream, faint, distant, but unmistakable. And every time I pass by, I always feel someone watching me from behind, with empty eyes and a wide, gaping mouth. Sometimes, on the quietest nights when the moonlight shines down on Wonderland, if you stand near the ruins of the cinema long enough, you'll hear it. The white knight scream and the whispers, "Please help me." The problem is, I don't know how to help someone who is already dead. Part 3. I'm not a sensitive person. Being a night security guard at Wonderland, the world's most famous amusement park, had taught me to be hardened to strange things. But when Morrison assigned me to check the simulated essential oil garden that Friday night, I felt a familiar unease. The garden was located in the park's east, a vast space enclosed by tall glass walls, simulating various aromas from around the world. A popular attraction for those who enjoyed natural scents. By day, it was a serene space with sunlight filtering through the glass dome, reflecting off vibrant flowers and models recreating grasslands, pine forests, and lavender fields. By night, it became a dark labyrinth of shadows and scents, especially when the auxiliary lighting system was off, leaving only the faint glow of LEDs along the pathways. "Check the essential oil spray system," Morrison said over the radio. "A few visitors complained that the lavender scent was too faint, just need to adjust the concentration." "Understood," I replied, putting on my LED headlamp and entering the garden. As soon as the automatic glass doors closed behind me, I felt the air change. It was much cooler inside than out, and there was something wrong with the scent. Not the gentle, subtle lavender aroma I was familiar with. This was a much stronger, denser smell, damp earth and metal. The smell of— "No way," I muttered, recognizing the scent. "Blood. That was the smell of blood." I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. Surely I was mistaken. Perhaps just a faulty essential oil that produced a distinct metallic smell. I ventured deeper into the garden, passing artfully arranged artificial flower beds. In the darkness, they looked like dark, shadowy hands reaching up from the ground, grasping at the air. The scent grew stronger as I approached the simulated lavender field, my inspection target. This area was designed to resemble a miniature lavender field in Provence, France, with thousands of pale purple artificial flowers mounted on a fake ground. The essential oil spray system was hidden beneath the ground, emitting scented mist every 30 minutes. I knelt, searching for the metal cover of the spray system. As my hand brushed against the artificial flowers, I realized they were wet. A sticky liquid clung to my fingers. I raised my hand into the light, fresh, sticky, thick red blood. I hastily wiped my hand on my pants, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered in a panic. And then I saw it. All the petals on the flower models were slowly turning a sickly yellow, as if wilting before my eyes. From the tips of the artificial flower stalks, fresh red liquid began to seep out, dripping onto the ground, forming small puddles. I sprang to my feet, backing away a few steps. In that moment of panic, my foot caught on a decorative stone, and I tumbled down, my face hitting the blood-seeping artificial flowers. Blood splattered onto my face, into my mouth, into my eyes. I hastily squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the warm, metallic liquid running down my cheeks. And then I heard it, a whisper, very close, as if someone was speaking directly into my ear. "Drink, I have waited long." I opened my eyes, struggling to stand. When I looked down, I realized I was lying in a pool of fresh red blood, almost a meter wide. The smell of blood filled my nostrils, and a strong metallic taste permeated my tongue. I coughed, trying to spit out the foul taste. My headlamp was still working, casting a shimmering beam through the mist-filled, blood-scented air. I looked around, trying to find my way out. And that's when I saw more clearly what was happening. The entire garden had transformed. The artificial flowers were no longer lavender, they had changed into chrysanthemums. Thousands of white chrysanthemums, all bleeding from their centers. The blood dripped down, forming small streams on the ground, eventually creating a large pool of blood in the center of the garden. And from that pool of blood, a face began to form. Not a face made of solid matter, but a face reflected on the surface of the fresh red liquid. The face of a little girl, perhaps 8 years old, with empty eyes and a twisted smile. "Drink," the whisper sounded again, clearer this time. "I have waited a long, long time." I realized the voice was coming from the face in the pool of blood. It wasn't making a sound, but I could still hear the voice in my head. "I don't know who you are," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm just a security guard. I came here to fix the essential oil spray system." The face in the blood pool twisted into a grotesque smile. "Fix? No need. Everything is perfect." I frantically searched for the metal cover of the essential oil spray system. I had to turn it off, had to stop whatever was happening. Finally, I found it. A small square metal plate embedded in the ground near the edge of the lavender area. I ran to it, trying not to look at the pool of blood and the face staring at me. When I opened the metal cover, a jet of red steam sprayed directly into my face, hot and metallic smelling. I screamed, recoiling, wiping my face with my blood-soaked sleeve. Inside the metal box was a tangle of wires and control valves. I wasn't a technician, but I knew enough to find the emergency switch. A large red button mounted on one side. I pressed it hard, and a loud hiss echoed throughout the garden. The spray system stopped abruptly, the hissing of steam vanished. But the smell was still there, the strong, pungent smell of blood, assaulting my brain, making my head spin. I turned back to look at the lavender area. The pool of blood was gone, and so was the face. Only normal artificial flowers remained, no sign of blood or any other liquid. "I'm losing my mind," I muttered, wiping sweat from my forehead. "It's all just an illusion." But when I looked down at my hands, they were still covered in blood. My uniform, too, soaked, sticky, bright red. I hurried towards the exit, wanting to escape this demonic garden as quickly as possible. But as I passed by another area, the simulated chrysanthemum field, I heard it, a lullaby. A soft, gentle melody sung by a child's voice. Not coming from speakers, but from the air around me as if the flowers themselves were singing. sleep now, little flower, your blood will make you grow. Sleep now, cry no more. When you wake, all will be red." I ran as fast as I could towards the glass doors, not daring to look back. The singing followed me, fading until I was out of the garden and the glass doors closed behind me. I stood there, gasping, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked down at my uniform, bracing myself to explain the blood-soaked state to Morrison. But there was no blood. My uniform was dry, clean, no trace of blood on my hands, face, or anywhere on my body. I turned back to look into the garden through the glass doors. Inside, it was pitch black, with only the faint light from the LEDs. No bleeding lavender, no pool of blood, no child's face. I took out my radio, my hands still trembling. "Morrison," I called, "I've finished checking the essential oil garden. The system has been adjusted." "Good job, Hartley." Morrison's voice was calm as usual. "Anything unusual?" I swallowed hard, looking back at the dark garden. I swore that for a fleeting moment, I saw a child's face pressed against the glass with a twisted smile and empty eyes. "No," I lied. "Everything's normal." I turned off the radio and left the area as quickly as I could. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't escape that smell. The metallic scent of blood, the smell of death and despair. And every time I closed my eyes, I still saw that face. The face of the little girl in the pool of blood, with a twisted smile and a whisper. "Drink. I have waited a long, long time." I never returned to that essential oil garden. I asked Morrison to switch my shift, my area, anything to avoid going near that place again. He agreed without asking, perhaps having seen the fear in my eyes. But the problem is, no matter where I go in Wonderland, I always feel that scent following me, the smell of blood. And sometimes, on the quietest nights, I still hear that lullaby echoing on the wind. Sleep now, little flower." I researched the history of the essential oil garden. It turned out that 30 years ago, an 8-year-old girl went missing there. They found her shoes next to the lavender area, but never found her body. And the strangest thing is, ever since then, the lavender in the garden always turns blood red at night, even though during the day they are their normal pale purple. Visitors think it's a lighting effect. Staff know better. And I know the truth. I tasted that little girl's blood, and now a part of her is always inside me, whispering secrets no one should ever know. Part 4. I don't know when the old arcade became an avoided area for most security guards at Wonderland. Located in the park's west, a small building with a glass dome yellowed by time, the arcade corner always gave off an uncomfortable feeling even before I heard the rumors. By day, it was filled with children's laughter and the beeping sounds of arcade machines. By night, it became a graveyard of silent machines with black screens, reflecting the darkness. I didn't like this area. Even before I knew about Wonderland's dark side, I always felt something was off about the arcade corner. Perhaps it was the way the neon lights flickered, creating strange shadows, or the way the pixelated game characters seemed to watch you move. Or perhaps it was just my intuition, warning me of what was to come. That night was a Wednesday, nearly 2:00 a.m. I was on my routine inspection, ensuring all areas were locked and secure. As I passed the arcade corner, I noticed something strange. The lights inside were still on, and the door was unlocked. "That's odd," I muttered, checking my schedule. In theory, this area should have been closed and locked since 10:00 p.m. I opened the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of stale popcorn and children's sweat hit my nostrils. But there was another smell, a faint ozone scent like after a thunderstorm, and a hint of burning metal. Inside, most of the game machines were off, their black screens silent and still. Only one machine was still operating. An old arcade machine in the furthest corner cast a faint blue light in the darkness. I approached cautiously. It was a classic platform game, perhaps from the 80s. The screen displayed a simple pixelated game with a small character running across a crumbling row of columns against a night sky. No sound, just the flickering light from the screen. Someone forgot to turn it off, I told myself, stepping forward to shut down the machine. But as I got closer, I noticed a strange detail. This machine had no off button. In fact, it didn't even have a power cord connected to the wall outlet. "No way," I muttered, checking around the machine. No power cord, no batteries, no power source at all. So how was it still working? I looked back at the screen. The game character was still running, jumping over obstacles, collecting virtual coins. The game looked familiar, but I couldn't remember its name. A strange thought popped into my head. Perhaps I should try playing, just once, to see if the game actually worked. I took a coin from my pocket and inserted it into the slot. A asterisk clink asterisk sound echoed as the coin dropped, and the screen changed to a new start screen. "Enter player name," the text flickered on the screen. I felt my hands trembling as I typed in my name. "Michael." The screen flickered, and the game began. The main character, a pixelated boy with dark hair and a red coat, stood at the top of a long staircase leading to an ancient castle with a starry night sky above. I started controlling the character, moving him down the stairs and into the castle. Inside, it was dark, with only the faint light from torches mounted on the walls. I guided the character deeper, through empty rooms and long corridors. And then something strange happened. When I reached a large room with a throne in the center, the character suddenly stopped. Not because I had stopped controlling him, but because he stopped on his own. Then, slowly, the character turned around, facing away from the screen, turning towards me. I stood there, frozen, as the pixelated character looked directly at me. It was impossible. Game characters couldn't look out of the screen. But he was doing it, his small black pixel eyes staring at me. And then the character's lips began to move. No sound, but a line of text appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Michael Hartley." I recoiled, cold sweat running down my spine. How did this game know my full name? I only entered Michael, not Hartley. I wanted to run, but an invisible force seemed to hold my feet in place. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, off the character staring at me with those black pixel eyes. New text appeared. "You've finally arrived. We've been waiting a long, long time." "Who is we?" I whispered, not expecting the game to hear me, but it did. The screen flickered and new text appeared. "The ones who died in Wonderland, the ones like me." I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I could only stand there, watching the screen with growing horror. The character in the game began to change. He grew taller, older, until he was no longer a boy, but a man with an eerily familiar face. My face. Not a perfect pixelated replica, but similar enough to be recognizable. The same dark hair, the same blue eyes, the same small scar on my chin from a childhood accident. "What?" I whispered, unable to believe my eyes. The screen flickered and the scene changed. No longer the ancient castle, but Wonderland, a pixelated version of the amusement park, with familiar buildings and areas I had walked through hundreds of times. The character, my pixelated self, began to move through the park, going to the areas where I had encountered terrifying things. The aquarium, the cinema, the essential oil garden. And in each area, a dark shadow appeared. Vague figures, just dark pixelated blobs with no discernible features. But I knew what they were. They were the things I had encountered in those places. The final text appeared. "You can't escape here, Michael. No one can. We are a part of Wonderland. And now so are you." The screen suddenly went black, leaving complete darkness. I stood there trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. Then the screen lit up again, displaying the new start screen with the flickering text. "Enter player name." "Oh," I muttered, backing away from the machine. "No, I'm not playing this game anymore." But as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. The control buttons of the game machine were moving on their own as if an invisible person was playing. I looked through the glass pane of the machine where I could see the buttons and joystick. And I saw it, invisible hands pressing the buttons, moving the joystick. Not real hands, I couldn't see them, but I could see the buttons being pressed down, the joystick moving. On the screen, a name was being entered. Michael Hartley. I watched, frozen in horror, as the game began. My pixelated character appeared at the Wonderland gate, but this time I wasn't controlling him. He moved automatically, delving deeper into the park. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen as the character entered an area I had never been to. A tall tower in the center of the park, where the main management office was located. The character climbed the tower, went through corridors, and finally entered a room with a large table. On the table was an open book. The character approached the book and a dialogue box appeared, "List of the dead in Wonderland." The page turned, displaying a long list of names, and at the bottom of the list, written in fresh red, was my name, Michael Hartley. The screen turned black and the words "Game Over" appeared, flashing brightly red. The game machine shut down abruptly, its screen turning pitch black. But in that last moment, before the darkness enveloped everything, I swore I saw a small line of text at the bottom of the screen. "Hello for the first and last time, Michael Hartley." I ran out of the arcade corner, not daring to look back. I ran across the central plaza, through the areas I had checked hundreds of times, until I reached the main security office. Morrison was sitting there, watching the security camera monitors. He looked up as I burst in, gasping for breath. "Hartley, what's wrong?" he asked, looking concerned. "The arcade corner," I panted. "Something's wrong there." Morrison frowned. "The arcade? No way. It's been closed since last month after that accident." I looked at him, a cold dread running down my spine. "What accident?" "Don't you remember?" Morrison looked at me strangely. "A young boy was electrocuted by one of the old game machines. He died instantly. They closed the area for investigation." I stood there, speechless. How could I explain that I had just been in an area that had been closed, playing a game that might have killed a child? I'm sure I'm mistaken," I lied. "Perhaps it was a different area." Morrison nodded, not entirely convinced. "Perhaps. You look tired, Hartley. Why don't you get some rest?" I nodded and left the office, knowing I wouldn't sleep that night, or perhaps for many nights to come. I never told anyone about my experience in the arcade. How could I? No one would believe me. But the next night, as I passed by that area, now sealed off with police tape, I swore I heard a faint beeping from inside and a faint blue light emanating from under the closed door. And when I checked Wonderland's employee roster in the records room, I saw something strange. Dozens of security guards had gone missing or died over the years, all after working night shifts. I wondered if my name was already written in that book, the book in the game, the list of those who would die in Wonderland. And sometimes, when I pass by a computer screen or a television in the park, I swear I see it. My pixelated self looking out from the screen, his mouth moving. "Hello for the first and last time." I tried to quit my job many times, but each time I tried, something stopped me. A powerful feeling that I couldn't leave Wonderland, that a part of me would always remain here, trapped in that endless game. And perhaps that's true. Perhaps no one truly leaves Wonderland, not entirely. Part 5. Jake, another security guard, was found drowned in the mini boat race area last month. A tragic accident, they said. He slipped, hit his head on the edge of the pond, and fell into the water. No one heard him cry for help. No one saw it, no one except me. I wasn't there when Jake died, but I heard it over the radio. His scream. Not the scream of someone who slipped and fell. It was the scream of someone witnessing something unimaginable. A scream cut short, followed by the sound of splashing water. I ran to the mini boat race area as fast as I could, but when I arrived, it was too late. The pond's surface was calm as a mirror. No sign of a struggle, only Jake's radio floating on the water and a faint bloodstain on the pond's edge. Today, 2 weeks after Jake's funeral, I was assigned to inspect that very mini boat race area. Management wanted to reopen the area tomorrow, and they needed me to ensure everything was safe. Safe? I almost laughed when I heard that word. Nothing in Wonderland was safe, especially at night. The mini boat race area was located in the park's south, an artificial pond about an acre wide, with colorful mini boats docked around its shore. By day, it buzzed with the laughter of children steering bumper boats. By night, it became a dark mirror reflecting the stars and distant flickering lights. I stood by the pond's edge, my flashlight in hand, casting a weak beam of light on the dark water. There was no wind, no waves, just an unusual stillness. Even the insects that usually chirped on summer nights were silent. "It's just a pond," I told myself, trying to calm down. "It's just water." I proceeded to check the control system on the right. A small control panel mounted on a stone wall allowed staff to start or stop the boats, adjust speed, and activate the underwater lighting system. I flicked the switch to check the lights. Nothing happened. The entire area remained in darkness. "Great," I muttered. "The lights are broken." I tried again, but still no result. That meant I had to go down to the rescue boat and check the lighting system from below. The thought of having to go into the middle of the pond at this hour sent shivers down my spine. I called Morrison over the radio. "The lights at the boat race area aren't working," I said. "I need to take the rescue boat to check them." "Understood," Morrison's voice crackled, punctuated by static. "Be careful, Hartley, and always stay in contact." "Understood," I replied, clipping the radio to my belt. The rescue boat, a small red dinghy with an electric motor, was docked at a separate pier away from the mini boats for visitors. I unlocked it, checked the battery, and started the motor. A gentle hum echoed in the silent space. I slowly steered the boat out to the middle of the pond, where the main lighting system was located. The calm water was parted by the boat's bow, creating small ripples that spread outwards. When I reached the center of the pond, I turned off the motor. Silence enveloped me, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the boat's hull. I shone my flashlight down at the water, trying to see the lighting system below. And then I noticed something strange. The water around my boat was moving. Not from the ripples my boat created, but a different movement, as if something underneath was moving, rising. I stared, unable to believe my eyes. The water seemed to be rushing towards my boat, flowing against natural laws, as if an invisible force was pulling it towards me. The boat began to spin gently, even though there was no wind or current. I tried to keep my balance, my heart pounding in my chest. "Morrison," I called over the radio, "something's wrong here." Only static replied. The radio wasn't working. The water around the boat began to churn, not from heat, but as if hundreds of invisible hands were stirring it from below. The rudder hissed even though the motor was off, and the boat shook violently. I gasped for breath, trying to stay calm. "It's just a natural phenomenon," I told myself, "perhaps gas rising from the bottom of the lake." But I knew that wasn't true. There was nothing natural about what was happening. I shone my flashlight down into the water, and my heart stopped. At the bottom of the pond, about 3 meters below the surface, was a face. Not Jake Peterson's face, but another face, a blurry, distorted face with empty eyes staring up at me. It wasn't a corpse. It didn't look solid. It was like a face made of the pond water itself, a face slowly rising towards me. "No," I whispered, trying to restart the motor. No, the motor wasn't working. The boat was now spinning faster, more violently, as if caught in an invisible whirlpool. And then suddenly everything stopped. The water became still as a mirror. The rudder's hiss ceased, the boat stopped spinning. I stood there, gasping, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for what I didn't know. But my instincts told me this wasn't the end. And I was right. The water began to recede, not in the usual way, but receding towards me, as if an invisible hole beneath my boat was sucking all the water in. In a few seconds, the water level dropped rapidly. My boat hit the bottom, stranded on the muddy pond bed. Around me, the other mini boats were also stranded, listing at odd angles. I stood there on the stranded rescue boat, looking around in utter horror. The entire pond was now dry, leaving only a thin layer of mud and small puddles of water. And amidst those puddles, I saw them, broken water bottles. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of shattered plastic water bottles covered in a sticky black substance. I stepped off the boat, ankle-deep in cold mud. These water bottles weren't ordinary trash. They looked old, many were partially decomposed, but all were covered in that strange black slime. I bent down to pick up the closest shard. As my finger touched it, a cold chill ran up my arm like an electric shock. I recoiled my hand, but it was too late. A memory knot mind-flooded my mind. A young girl, perhaps 16, drinking water from this bottle at Wonderland on a hot day many years ago. She felt dizzy and then darkness. She never left the park. I dropped the shard, backing away in horror. But as I stepped back, my heel hit something. Not another water bottle, but a hand. A cold, lifeless hand reaching out from the mud, grabbing my ankle. I screamed, yanked my foot free, and fell backward into the mud. The hand vanished as if sucked back into the mud. But it wasn't the only thing. All around me, from the muddy ground, hands began to rise, dozens, hundreds of hands. Not real hands, but hand-like shapes formed from mud and water, reaching up as if to grasp at the air or to grasp at me. I scrambled up, trying to run towards the shore, but the mud was too thick, too sticky, pulling at my legs as if unwilling to let me go. From everywhere I heard sighs. A long, drawn-out sigh emanating from the very air around me, echoing to the distant shore. "Help us!" The whisper sounded, not from a single source, but from hundreds of different voices intertwined. "We are thirsty." I struggled forward, each step feeling as heavy as the weight of the world. The mud clung to my shoes, to my pants, climbing higher and higher, as if trying to swallow me. "We are thirsty," the whisper continued, louder, closer. "Give us water." I don't know how, but I finally reached the shore. With one last effort, I pulled myself out of the mud, collapsing onto the cold concrete. From my safe position, I turned back to look. The entire pond bottom was now moving, mud churning, forming human-like shapes with long, outstretched arms and distorted faces. And then the water began to return, not from any supply source, but seemingly from the air itself. It condensed, forming drops, then streams, pouring down into the pond bed, gradually refilling it. The muddy figures disappeared beneath the rising water, leaving only ripples on the surface. I stood up, trembling, watching the pond gradually return to normal. My rescue boat was now floating again as if it had never been stranded. I tried to calm myself, pulling out my radio. "Morrison," I called, my voice still shaky. "I've finished checking the boat race area. Everything's fine." "Good job, Hartley." Morrison's voice was clear and static-free. "Are the lights working?" I looked down at the water and realized that the lighting system was now on, casting shimmering blue beams through the water. "Yes," I replied. "They're working normally." "Great, head to the next area." I turned off the radio, looking back at the mini boat race area one last time. The pond was now as calm as a mirror, no sign of what had just happened. If it weren't for the mud still clinging to my pants and shoes, I could almost convince myself it was all an illusion. But I knew better. I had felt it. The thirst of the trapped souls at the bottom of the pond. The ones who had come to Wonderland and never left. The ones like Jake Peterson. And I knew that every time a child threw a water bottle into the pond, every time a visitor drank water at Wonderland, those souls were watching, thirsty, waiting. Waiting for someone like me, foolish enough to go into the middle of the pond at night. Since that night, I always carry a full water bottle on duty, not to drink, but to offer if needed. A promise that I haven't forgotten them, the ones who died of thirst in Wonderland. And sometimes, when I pass by the mini boat race area on quiet nights, I swear I can hear whispers from beneath the water. We are still thirsty. Part 6. There were areas in Wonderland that even the most seasoned staff avoided at night. Areas where shifts were swapped, sudden reasons given to avoid inspection. These were places where stories were whispered in the break room about those who had gone in and never come out, or worse, came out but were never the same. The animated art gallery was one of those places. I had heard the rumors about whispers emanating from paintings with no source, about faces in the paintings turning to follow your gaze, about dark shadows moving inside the frames when no one was looking. For the first 9 months of my employment at Wonderland, I had been lucky enough to avoid inspection duty for that area. There was always someone else who volunteered. But tonight, fate was not on my side. "Hartley, you'll be checking the animated art gallery," Morrison said, not looking up from his assignment list. I stood there, feeling my blood run cold. "The gallery? I thought that was Davis's area." "Davis quit," Morrison replied, his voice flat. "He hasn't come in since last week." I swallowed hard. Davis, a seasoned security guard with over 10 years of experience, had disappeared after his last shift at the gallery. No note, no warning, he simply never returned. I can't," I began, but Morrison cut me off. "It's just an art gallery, Hartley. Check the alarm system, make sure no one's inside, and lock up. 10 minutes tops." I nodded, knowing there was no way to avoid this. "Understood, boss." Morrison handed me the key. An old brass key, distinct from the modern keycards used for most other areas in the park. "And Hartley, be careful." I looked at him, trying to read his expression. Did he believe the rumors too, or was he just talking about standard safety procedures? "I'm always careful," I replied, clipping the key to my belt and leaving the office. The animated art gallery was located in the park's northeast corner, a 2-story stone and glass building with classical European architecture that contrasted sharply with Wonderland's other modern areas. By day, it was one of the most popular attractions, showcasing digital artworks where paintings changed, moved, and came alive before the audience's eyes. By night, it became a dark fortress with tall windows obscured by thick black velvet curtains. I stood before the entrance, flashlight gripped tightly in my hand. The full moon cast a silver streak across the building's facade, highlighting the intricate carvings on the stone. Angels and demons, mythical creatures and humans, all intertwined in an eternal dance on the stone. "It's just a building," I told myself, taking out the key and opening the door. The heavy wooden door creaked open with a long, drawn-out groan, as if protesting being disturbed. Inside, it was pitch black, not a single ray of light. I turned on my flashlight, sweeping it down the corridor ahead. The gallery was divided into several small rooms, each showcasing a different type of art. The first room, just beyond the entrance, displayed traditional works, oil paintings, pastels, and small sculptures. I walked through this room quickly, not wanting to linger longer than necessary. My task was to check the animated art gallery, the very last area at the end of the corridor. As I walked along the long corridor, my footsteps echoed on the marble floor. The walls were covered with dark red velvet wallpaper, absorbing the light from my flashlight, making its beam weak and faint. Finally, I reached the animated art gallery. A pair of black oak doors led into this area, with a brass sign that read, "Animated Art Gallery, where art comes alive." I took a deep breath and pushed the doors open. Inside was a large exhibition room with a high ceiling and polished wooden floors. Along the walls were digital frames, each containing a flat screen displaying animated artworks. By day, these screens would glow brightly, showing continuously changing paintings with automatic brushstrokes appearing and disappearing, creating fresh and creative images. Now, they were all dark, with only the faint light from small LEDs in the corner of each frame indicating they were still powered. I listened in silence, and then I heard it, the sound of paper turning, not actual paper but a digitally simulated sound, a soft rustle as a virtual page was turned in a digital painting. The small sound echoed in the silent space of the gallery. "Is anyone still here?" I called out, my voice echoing off the empty walls. No reply, just the sound of pages turning, faster, clearer. I moved forward, sweeping my flashlight around the room. All the frames were dark, showing no images, but the sound of turning pages continued, seemingly coming from every direction at once. I stopped in front of the first painting, a large black wooden frame containing a flat screen. In theory, it should have been off at night. But as I shone my flashlight on it, I saw an image slowly emerging. It was a black and white ink drawing of a woman. Not a specific woman I recognized, just a generic female face with long hair and large eyes. The face looked straight ahead, expressionless. I stood there, shining my flashlight on the painting, feeling a strange unease. There was nothing particularly special about this painting, but something felt wrong. as if the eyes in the painting were actually looking at me, not just a static image. As I leaned closer, observing carefully, I saw it. The woman's face in the painting had subtly tilted her head to the side, just a little, enough for me to notice. And her mouth, initially an expressionless straight line, had now curved into a slight smileless smirk that didn't reach her eyes. I jumped back, my heart pounding. It was impossible. Paintings didn't change on their own at night. They were programmed to display specific animations during opening hours and turn off when the park closed. The painting next to it began to vibrate, drawing my attention. It was another painting, also black and white ink, but this time a landscape. A forest with towering trees and a small path leading into the darkness. As I looked at it, the ink lines began to blur, flowing downwards like rainwater on glass. They gathered at the bottom of the painting, forming a hand. A hand drawn in black ink, with long, slender fingers that seemed to reach out of the frame. The pungent smell of printer ink suddenly hit my nostrils, a strong scent of fresh ink as if someone had just printed a page. The sound of turning pages grew faster and faster, echoing in the space, like the sound of a book being quickly flipped through by invisible hands. I backed away, feeling my back hit a wall. I turned and found myself facing another frame, the last frame in the large room and the furthest from the exit. This painting was different from the others. It wasn't an abstract image or a landscape. It was the image of a dress, a black morning dress hanging on an invisible hook against a white background. As my flashlight beam hit it, I noticed the dress seemed wet. Drops of black liquid were falling from the hem, forming a small puddle at the bottom of the painting. And then a drop, a real drop, not part of the digital image, fell from the frame, hitting the wooden floor with a soft asterisk tack asterisk. I looked down, unable to believe my eyes. A drop of black ink, or some liquid that looked like ink, had fallen from the painting onto the floor. It began to spread, seeping into the wood, forming a strange shape like a small face looking up, with empty eyes and a wide, open mouth in a silent scream. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and ran towards the door, not daring to look back at the changing paintings, not daring to face the faces and hands reaching out from the ink. I burst out of the exhibition room, ran down the corridor, only stopping when I reached the main door. I hastily locked the door, my hands trembling so much it took 3 tries to secure it. As I turned to leave, the door nudged my back gently, as if someone was pushing from inside. I stood there, frozen, waiting, but nothing happened, only the soft wind and the distant rustling of leaves. I took out my radio, my hands still shaking. "Morrison," I called, "I've checked the art gallery, everything's fine." "Good job, Hartley." Morrison's voice was calm as usual. "Anything unusual?" I looked back at the dark, silent building. How could I tell him about the changing paintings, about the faces and hands, about the drop of ink that had fallen onto the floor? "No," I lied. "Nothing unusual." "Good, head to the next area." I turned off the radio and started to walk away from the gallery, feeling a cold dread clinging to me. But before I went too far, I stopped, turned back to look, and I saw it. A face pressed against the second-story window of the gallery. A woman's face, exactly like the one in the first painting, with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. Just for a moment, then it was gone. I never returned to the animated art gallery. I asked Morrison to change my shift, my area, anything to avoid going near that place again. He agreed without asking, perhaps having seen the fear in my eyes. A few weeks later, I heard the gallery was closed for renovation. They replaced all the digital frames with ordinary printed works. No one spoke of the real reason. But sometimes, when I pass by that building on quiet nights, I still hear it. The sound of paper turning, the soft rustle of invisible pages being flipped. And sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I see a woman's face with a smirk in the second-story window, looking down, waiting. Waiting for another security guard, brave enough or foolish enough to open the door at night. Part 7. Wonderland had unwritten rules that every night security guard had to follow if they wanted a smooth shift. Never enter the cinema area alone. Always carry a spare flashlight. Never mention the strange sounds you hear over the radio. And most importantly, stay away from the emergency tunnels. There were 17 emergency tunnels scattered throughout Wonderland, designed as emergency exits in case of fire or natural disaster. They led from the park's main areas to the outside parking lot, allowing for quick evacuation when needed. In theory, the emergency tunnels were the safest places in the park. In reality, they were places where even the most seasoned security guards dared not enter alone after dark. I had been at Wonderland long enough to hear the rumors about those tunnels. They weren't merely exits, they were something else. Gaps between realities where the boundary between this world and another became thin. That fateful night was a rainy one of those rare downpours in this region when lightning tore across the sky and thunder rumbled like the roar of an ancient beast. Wonderland was deserted due to the bad weather, leaving only night security guards like me stuck on duty. Morrison assigned me to check the southern area, which included Emergency Tunnel 7, the tunnel leading from the Adventure Games area to the east parking lot. According to the report, a motion sensor in the tunnel had been triggered, possibly by a wild animal straying in or a technical malfunction due to the heavy rain. "Just a quick check," Morrison said over the radio, his voice distorted by the thunder. "Make sure the tunnel door is locked and there are no signs of forced entry." "Understood," I replied, adjusting my raincoat and stepping outside. The heavy rain lashed at my face like icy needles, relentless. I bowed my head and hurried towards the Adventure Games area, where Emergency Tunnel 7 was located. This area was designed like a miniature tropical forest, with towering artificial trees and adventure games hidden amidst the foliage. By day, it buzzed with the laughter and excited shouts of visitors. By night, under heavy rain, it became a dark labyrinth of moving shadows and rustling leaves. I walked along the main path, my flashlight casting a weak beam through the curtain of rain. The emergency tunnel was at the end of the path, a small metal door embedded in the back of a large artificial rock. As I approached, I noticed the door was still closed, and the electronic lock next to it was still glowing red, indicating it was locked. No signs of forced entry or damage. "Morrison," I called over the radio, "Tunnel 7 is secure, door locked, no unusual signs." Only static replied. The radio wasn't working, probably due to the storm. I sighed, deciding to return to the main security office to report directly. But as I turned, my flashlight beam caught something, a small crack on the artificial rock wall right next to the tunnel door. This crack was not part of the original design. I had walked through here hundreds of times and had never seen it. It was new, a hairline fracture running along the rock surface. Curious, I approached, shining my flashlight into the crack. It was deeper than I thought, extending into the rock as if leading to another space. And then I heard it, tapping. Not the sound of rain or thunder, this was deliberate tapping, clearly the sound of knuckles on a hard surface. It came from inside the crack. Tap, 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 3 taps, then silence, then repeated. A classic knocking pattern, as if someone was trying to get attention. I stood there, frozen, the rain still beating on my back. The rational part of me screamed that I should run, turn back to the security office and report to Morrison. But another part, a deeper, more primal part, urged me to move closer to look more carefully. I bent down, pressing my eye to the crack, trying to peer inside. At first, I saw nothing but darkness, but then a flicker of light from within, not natural light, but artificial light, like from another flashlight. And then I saw it, an eye, a human eye, staring back at me from the other side of the crack. I recoiled, my heart pounding in my chest. That eye didn't belong to a security guard or a lost visitor. It was different, too large, too round, with an unnaturally intense gaze. And then words began to appear next to the crack. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, but as I shone my flashlight on the rock wall, I clearly saw the letters slowly forming, as if carved by an invisible hand. HELPME, word by word, slowly and painfully, as if the writer was exerting great effort. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Do you need help?" No reply, just the repeated tapping, 3 taps, then silence, then 3 more. I pulled out my radio, trying to contact Morrison again, but still only static. I was alone, I had to decide for myself. I reached out, touching the crack. As my finger made contact, I felt a cold, sticky substance cling to my skin. I recoiled my hand, looking down. A thick, black liquid clung to my fingertip, sticky and cold. My heart pounded, but I couldn't abandon someone who might need help. If someone was trapped in the tunnel, I had to do something. I took out my staff card, swiped it on the electronic lock next to the tunnel door. The light changed from red to green, and the door opened with a dry click. Inside was a long concrete tunnel, lit by emergency bulbs spaced every few meters. The tunnel was completely empty, no sign of anyone. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice echoing down the tunnel. No reply, just the sound of rain outside and water dripping from the damp tunnel ceiling. I stepped in, walking along the tunnel, my flashlight still ahead of me. This tunnel was about 100 meters long, straight as an arrow, leading directly to the parking lot. There was nowhere to hide, no turns or blind spots. When I was about halfway through, I noticed something on the right wall. I shone my flashlight on it and saw another crack, exactly like the crack I had seen outside, but larger, wide enough for me to insert my entire hand. The tapping sounded again 3 taps, then silence. But this time, it came from beyond this crack. "Are you there?" I called out, approaching the crack. "I'm a security guard. Can I help you?" Still no reply, just the repeated tapping with patient rhythm. I ran my hand over the crack, and once again my hand got covered in that cold, sticky liquid. I raised my hand, shining my flashlight on it. It wasn't water or oil, it looked like blood. Partially clotted blood, dark and thick. My heart pounded in my chest, and I found it hard to breathe. The rational part of me screamed that I should turn back, that no one was trapped here, that this was a trap. But before I could move, something appeared in the crack, a hand. A thin, pale hand with unnaturally long fingers and dirty nails. It reached out from the crack, fingers splayed as if searching for something to grasp. I recoiled, my flashlight trembling in my hand. That hand didn't belong to a normal person. It was too slender, too pale, with abnormally long fingers and an unnatural way of moving. The hand reached further out until its wrist was also visible from the crack. On the wrist was a rusted metal band, like an ancient handcuff, with a broken chain attached to it. "Who, what?" I stammered, unable to speak from fear. The hand twitched as if trying to reach further. Its long nails scraped at the air, creating an unpleasant tearing sound. I recoiled, hitting my back against the opposite wall. My flashlight dropped from my hand, clattering onto the concrete floor. The light flickered, illuminating the tunnel ceiling, creating grotesque shapes and movements. In that flickering light, I saw it, a face pressed against the crack, trying to peer out. A gaunt, pale face with sunken eyes and sparse hair. Its mouth was wide open, too wide for a human face, as if its jaw had been dislocated. And from that mouth, a sound escaped. Not a voice, but a long, silent scream that made the air around me vibrate, even though I heard nothing. The corridor suddenly fell silent. No more rain, no more dripping water, no more my gasping breaths. Only absolute silence, as if time had stopped. My flashlight went out, leaving complete darkness, only my heavy, rapid breathing echoing in the silent space. And then another sound echoed, no longer tapping, but the dragging of a chain, the sound of metal clanging against concrete, slow and steady, advancing towards me in the darkness. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and ran as fast as I could towards the exit door I had entered. I ran in the darkness, my hand touching the wall for guidance, my feet stumbling many times, but I kept getting up and running. The chain sound still followed me, no faster, no slower, with an eerily steady rhythm. Finally, I saw light, the light from the exit door, still open. I ran faster, trying to reach it before whatever was following me caught up. I burst out into the pouring rain and slammed the tunnel door shut. The emergency lights inside the tunnel were off, leaving only pitch blackness. But in that last moment before the door closed, I swore I saw it. A thin figure with unnaturally long arms and a head tilted to one side, standing right beyond the threshold, its face still in a silent scream. The door closed with a click, the automatic lock engaging. I recoiled, gasping for breath, rain and sweat streaming down my face. My radio suddenly crackled, startling me. "Hartley, can you hear me?" Morrison's voice was clear and static-free. "Yes," I panted. "I hear you." "Good, we lost contact with you for almost an hour. Is everything all right?" "An hour? No way. I had only been in the tunnel for a few minutes." I'm fine," I lied. "Just a problem with the radio in the rain." "Understood. How's Tunnel 7? I looked back at the closed tunnel door and noticed something strange. The crack I had seen earlier, the crack from which the hand had reached out, had vanished. The artificial rock wall was now perfectly intact, no sign of a crack or damage. "Everything's fine," I said, my voice still shaky. "Nothing unusual." "Good, head back to the office. Your shift is almost over." I nodded, even though Morrison couldn't see me over the radio. "I'll be right back." I started to walk away from the emergency tunnel, but before I went too far, I noticed something strange. On my right hand, where I had touched the crack and gotten that cold, sticky liquid on me, there was now a red mark. Not a wound or a cut, but an imprint, as if someone had pressed an invisible seal onto my skin. The mark was shaped like a thin hand with unnaturally long fingers. I never told anyone about my experience in Emergency Tunnel 7. No one would believe me, but I knew what I had seen, heard, felt. The mark on my hand disappeared after a few days, but the cold sensation didn't. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear it. The 3 taps, then silence, repeated. The tapping of someone trying to get out, or perhaps the tapping of something trying to get in. Part 8. That night was a quiet October evening, when leaves began to change color and the air carried the chill of autumn. Wonderland was still crowded, though it was nearing closing time, with the last visitors trying to enjoy the rides before heading home. I was standing near the main gate, watching the crowd gradually thin out. Morrison called over the radio. "Hartley, check the last mini train. Make sure it's working properly for tomorrow." The mini train was one of Wonderland's main modes of transport, running on a circular track around the park, helping visitors move between areas easily. The last ride of the day usually left at 10:00 p.m., taking the remaining visitors to the main gate. "Understood," I replied, starting to walk towards the nearby train station. When I arrived, the last mini train was already parked at the station, empty and silent. It consisted of 5 cars, each capable of holding about 10 people, with red velvet seats and large glass windows. By day, it was vibrant with colored lights and cheerful music. By night, it looked like a long metal snake coiled on the track, waiting. I stepped onto the first car, where the control panel was located. According to procedure, I needed to check the electrical system, brakes, and ensure everything was ready for the next day. As I sat down in the driver's seat, I noticed something strange. The lights on the control panel were flickering, even though I hadn't turned on the main switch. Green and red lights alternated, creating an irregular pattern. "That's odd," I muttered, checking the main switch. It was in the off position, but the lights continued to flicker. I turned on the main switch and the train vibrated gently. The engine started with a low hum. All the lights on the control panel lit up, no longer flickering. Perhaps just a minor glitch, I told myself, starting to check the systems. The brakes worked normally, so did the lighting system in the car. I turned on the microphone to check the sound system. "Test, test." I spoke into the microphone, my voice echoing through the speakers in all the cars. Everything seemed to be working normally. I stood up, preparing to check each car before finishing. And then, suddenly, the lights in the first car went out. Not just the lights in the car, but the headlights at the front of the train also went out, leaving complete darkness. "Damn it!" I muttered, trying to turn the light switch back on, but it had no effect. I took out my flashlight, sweeping it around the car, which was now shrouded in darkness. And then something strange happened. The train began to move. Not fast, but slowly, almost imperceptibly. But I could feel it. The gentle sensation of wheels rolling on the track, the faint friction of metal. I quickly returned to the control panel to check. All the gauges and indicator lights were off, leaving only a black screen. The control lever was still in the park position, but the train was still moving. "Morrison," I called over the radio. "The mini train is moving on its own. I'm not controlling it." Only static replied. The radio wasn't working. The train was speeding up, slowly but surely. I looked out the window, seeing the buildings and trees of Wonderland whizzing past in the darkness. There were no lights in the park, as if the entire power system had been cut. I tried to pull the emergency brake, but it didn't respond. I tried to open the car doors, but they were locked. I was trapped in a self-moving mini-train in a dark amusement park. The train continued to move through the areas where I had encountered terrifying things. The burned-out cinema, the essential oil garden with its bleeding flowers, the lake with its thirsty souls, the gallery with its living paintings. It was as if it was giving me a tour, revisiting the places where I had experienced horror. And in each area, I saw them, dark shadows standing by the track, watching the train pass. Not security guards or visitors, but vague figures, just dark blobs, darker than the surrounding night. They stood motionless, but I knew they were watching, staring directly at me. The train's headlights suddenly flashed on, shining directly into the empty seats in the cars. I turned to look and saw an impossible sight. All the cars were empty, but the headlights shone on them in such a way that the seats seemed to be occupied. Vague, dark shadows like phantom passengers. The strange sound of wheels hitting the track was no longer a rolling sound, but the sound of metal grinding against other metal. Screech, screech, screech asterisk, like fingernails on a chalkboard. A cold wind gusted through the windows, even though all the doors were closed. It carried a strange scent, old popcorn, foul lake water, printer ink, and another scent, sweet and pungent, the smell of decay. I tried to calm down, thinking about my options. The train couldn't run forever. It had to stop somewhere, and then I would find a way out. But the train showed no signs of stopping. It continued to move from one area to another, as if going around the park indefinitely. And then the sound system came on. Not the cheerful music usually played in the mini-train, but a distorted voice as if speaking through a layer of water. The first and also the last. The voice echoed in the car, sending shivers down my spine. It didn't sound like any voice I had heard. Not male, not female, not old, not young, just different. The first and also the last, the voice repeated, louder, clearer. "Who's that?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Who's speaking?" No reply, just the screeching of the wheels and the cold wind gusting through the gaps in the doors. The train began to slow down gradually until it stopped completely. I looked out the window, realizing we had stopped at the final station, right before Wonderland's main gate. The car door opened with a hiss as if inviting me out. I stood up, cautiously approaching the door, and then I looked down at the car floor and saw them, footprints. Not ordinary footprints, but wet red footprints, as if someone had just stepped through a puddle of blood and left a trail. The footprints led from the last car, through all the cars, and stopped right in front of me. But no one was there, no one to make these footprints. I stepped out of the car, feeling the cold autumn night air embrace me. Wonderland's main gate loomed before me, closed and dark. I turned back to look at the mini-train. It stood there silently, its car doors still open, no sign of activity or anything unusual. I took out my radio, trying to contact Morrison again. "Morrison, can you hear me?" "Clear, Hartley." Morrison's voice was clear and static-free. "How's the mini-train?" "It." I hesitated, not knowing how to explain the strange ride I had just experienced. "It's working fine. I've finished checking it." "Good, get back to the office. Your shift is over." I turned off the radio, looking back at the mini-train one last time. And then I saw it, a face pressed against the window of the last car. A vague face, just a pale blur on the glass. But I could see the eyes, empty black eyes staring directly at me. Just for a moment, then it vanished. The car doors closed simultaneously, and the train began to move again, sliding into the darkness of Wonderland. I stood there, trembling, watching until the train disappeared from sight. Then I turned and walked quickly towards the security office, not daring to look back. But before I went too far, I noticed something strange beneath my feet. I shone my flashlight down and saw it, a red footprint, exactly like the one I had seen in the train car. And it wasn't just one print, but a trail of footprints leading from the mini-train to, right behind me. I spun around, raising my flashlight. No one was there, but the footprints continued to appear, one by one, as if someone invisible was slowly walking towards me. I ran as fast as I could towards the security office, not daring to look back. But no matter how fast I ran, I still heard it. The soft footsteps following, and the faint giggle echoing in the night air. I never rode the mini-train alone again after that night. And every time I hear the wheels screeching on the track, I remember that last ride. The ride that took me through all the places where I had encountered horror. As if it was reminding me that Wonderland never forgets. Sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind blows through Wonderland, carrying the distant laughter of visitors who left long ago, I still hear it. The distorted voice over the sound system, the first and also the last. And I wonder if it's a warning or a promise. Part 9. New security guards at Wonderland often asked me, "Hartley, which place in the park is the scariest?" I never answered directly. How could I compare areas when each had its own mysteries? Every corner of Wonderland had its own brand of strangeness. But if forced to choose, I would tell them about the haunted restaurant in the food court. Grimm's Feast restaurant was located in the furthest corner of the food court, a two-story building with classical European architecture, designed in the style of the Brothers Grimm's dark fairy tales. The exterior was decorated with dark oak and gray stone, with tall, narrow windows and pointed roofs. By day, it was a popular attraction where families could enjoy a meal in a fairy tale-themed setting, with waiters dressed as characters like Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood, or Hansel and Gretel. By night, when the staff had left and darkness fell, the place became an entirely different entity. I had heard rumors from other security guards about children's laughter echoing from the empty kitchen, about the smell of hot food wafting from pots that had been turned off long ago, about tables moving on their own in the night, and small footprints appearing on the floor even though no one was there. I had been fortunate enough to avoid inspection duty for this restaurant for many months of working at Wonderland. Until that night. "Hartley, you'll be checking Grimm's Feast," Morrison said over the radio. "According to reports, someone saw lights inside even though it's been closed since 8:00 p.m. I swallowed hard, my hand instinctively tightening around the radio. "Understood, I'll check it right away." "And Hartley," Morrison added, his voice lowering, "be careful." I turned off the radio and started walking towards the food court. That night was a moonless November night. The sky was pitch black, not a single star, as if the universe was holding its breath. The air was cold and still. Not a gentle breeze, not an insect sound, only my footsteps echoing on the paved path. The food court stretched across the park's west, a large plaza with many restaurants and snack stands. By day, it buzzed with laughter and the delicious smells of food. By night, it became a graveyard of empty tables and chairs stacked on top of each other like metal skeletons. Grimm's Feast was located in the furthest corner, isolated from the other restaurants. As I approached, I noticed there were no lights coming from inside, as the report had stated. The building was dark, its windows black like empty eyes staring at me. Perhaps it was just a false report, I told myself, trying to calm down. I approached the main door, a large wooden door with a brass wolf head handle. I inserted my staff card into the electronic lock next to it, hearing a soft click as the lock disengaged. The door opened with a long, drawn-out creak, as if protesting being disturbed at this hour. Inside, it was pitch black, not a single light. I turned on my flashlight, sweeping it across the space in front of me. The restaurant was designed like a miniature ancient castle, with fake stone walls and a soaring ceiling. The main space was a large dining room with many round tables and wooden chairs. On the walls hung illustrations of fairy tale scenes, but with a darker style than the Disney versions most people were familiar with. In the center of the room was a small dance floor, where fairy tale characters usually performed during meal times. I walked in, my flashlight beam sweeping across the room. Everything seemed normal, tables and chairs neatly arranged, floors clean, no sign of anyone. "Just a false report," I repeated, feeling a little relieved. But as I turned to leave, I heard it a creak, not from the door but from below, from the wooden floor beneath my feet. I stood still, listening. The creak repeated, clearer this time, as if someone was walking beneath the floor. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. No reply, just the creaking sound stopping for a moment, then continuing rhythmically, like footsteps. I knew there was no basement under the restaurant. According to Wonderland's blueprints that I had seen, Grimm's Feast was built directly on the ground, with the wooden floor laid over a system of concrete beams. There was no space underneath for anyone to move. And yet, the footsteps continued, moving throughout the room, occasionally stopping then resuming. I decided to investigate further. Perhaps it was just a small animal that had found its way under the floor, a mouse perhaps, or a stray cat. I began a walk across the dining room, heading towards the kitchen. And then I noticed something strange. As I walked, red marks appeared beneath my feet, as if I was stepping on wet paint, but I didn't feel any liquid under my shoes. The floor was dry and firm as usual. I stopped, turned back to look, a trail of red footprints marking my path, even though I was sure I hadn't stepped in anything. "What?" I muttered, bending down to check my shoe soles. Nothing. No red marks, no paint, no liquid. I stood up and noticed another strange thing. The red marks on the floor were changing. They were spreading out like small puddles, and the red color was deepening from pale pink to bright red. The creaking beneath the floor grew louder, more frantic, no longer rhythmic like footsteps, but like someone scratching, trying to get up. The smell of rotten food suddenly hit my nostrils. The smell of rancid meat, decaying vegetables, and a sweet, pungent smell I couldn't identify. The scent grew so strong that I had to cover my nose with my hand. And then, from the kitchen, I heard it, the clatter of dishes as if someone was setting the table. I turned, shining my flashlight towards the kitchen. The kitchen door was ajar, a faint light emanating from the gap. Hello, I called out loudly, trying to keep my voice steady. The clattering stopped and a heavy, oppressive silence enveloped the room. I advanced towards the kitchen, step by step, carefully. Each step still left red marks, now as dark as blood. The wooden floor still creaked, but it was no longer a sound from below. Now it sounded like old wood groaning under a heavy weight. When I reached the kitchen door, I stopped and listened. No sound from inside. I pushed the door open, shining my flashlight in. The kitchen was empty, with industrial stoves, refrigerators, and shelves of utensils. No one was there. No light source that I had seen from the gap in the door. I stepped in, checking every corner of the kitchen, no sign of anyone. All the equipment was off, cold to the touch. I returned to the main dining room, still bewildered by the light I had seen and the sounds I had heard. Perhaps it was just my imagination, triggered by the spooky stories I had heard about this place. I decided to quickly check the second floor before leaving. A spiral wooden staircase led upstairs, where there was a smaller dining area designed like a watchtower. As I began to climb the stairs, I bent down and touched a red mark on the floor. The cold liquid clung to my fingers. I raised my hand, looking closely under the flashlight. Blood. It was blood. Not fresh blood, but partially clotted, dark and thick. I hastily wiped my hand on my pants. Nausea rose in my throat. As I stood up, the blood from the floor seemed to flow back up my legs. Not pulled by gravity, but as if it was moving on its own, climbing up my shoes, up my pant legs, smoking faintly upon contact with my skin. I frantically shook my legs, trying to get rid of the terrifying liquid. But it seemed to cling, and the more I tried to shake it off, the higher, faster it climbed. In a panic, I turned back towards the exit door and I saw it. A dark shadow standing next to the main door. Not a person, not entirely, just a blurry shape like a shadow without a source, standing there motionless. Who? What? I stammered, backing away. The shadow didn't move, didn't respond, but I could feel it watching me, even though it had no eyes, no face, just a dense black mass. I turned, deciding to leave through the back door. But as I turned, I saw another dark shadow standing at the kitchen door, and another at the foot of the stairs, and another next to the bar. They were surrounding me, shapeless dark shadows, standing motionless like statues of darkness. My heart pounded, cold sweat ran down my spine. I turned my head, searching for an escape, but every exit was blocked by shadows. And then the floor began to shake. Not a slight tremor, but rhythmic vibrations, as if something enormous was moving underneath. The creaking grew louder, more frantic, until it sounded like wood being torn apart. I looked down and saw the floor beginning to crack. Small fissures appeared, spreading like spiderwebs, and from those cracks, blood began to seep out, fresh and thick. No, I whispered, backing away until my back hit a wall. Impossible. More blood poured out, faster, forming small puddles on the floor. And from those blood puddles, hands began to rise. Small hands like children's hands, fresh, red, and sticky. I stood there, frozen in horror, watching the hands reach out from the floor, grasping the edges of the broken cracks and pulling harder until the floor began to break open, revealing a dark void beneath. And from that void, faces began to emerge. Not human faces, not entirely. They were distorted, grotesque, with unnaturally large eyes and unnaturally wide mouths. Children's faces, but not normal children. They looked up at me with hungry eyes and unnaturally wide, toothy smiles. I realized what they were. They were the characters from the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales, but not the sanitized versions for modern children. These were the original, brutal, and bloody versions. Hansel and Gretel were not innocent children escaping a witch, but hungry creatures who had eaten her. Little Red Riding Hood was not saved by the hunter, but had been swallowed by the wolf and become a part of it. They were climbing up, one by one, from the void beneath the floor. Small, blood-red hands reaching out, grasping the edges of the broken floor, pulling their distorted bodies up. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I lunged towards the main door, where one of the dark shadows was standing. I didn't care what it was. I had to get out of here, had to get out of this restaurant. As I dashed through the shadow, I felt a cold chill pass through me, as if I had just run through a wall of ice. But I didn't stop. I kept running, pushed the main door open, and burst out into the night air. I ran and ran, not daring to look back until I reached the main security office. I burst in, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Morrison was sitting there, looking up from his computer screen with surprise. "Hartley, what's wrong?" he asked, standing up. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I stood there trying to catch my breath. How could I explain about the bloodstains, the dark shadows, the hands reaching out from the floor? How could I tell him about the distorted faces of fairy tale characters, warped by horror? I'm not sure, I finally managed to say. Perhaps it's just my imagination, but I think we should recheck it in the morning with more people. Morrison nodded, not entirely convinced. All right, I'll make a note to check it in the morning. I nodded, thanked him, and went into the break room to get a glass of water. As I looked down, I realized my pants were still clean, no bloodstains, no sign of what I had just experienced. Perhaps it was all just my imagination. Perhaps I had been overworked, and my tired mind had conjured those hallucinations. But when I looked in the mirror in the restroom, I saw it. A small, fresh red handprint on the collar of my white shirt. A child's handprint, but with unnaturally long, strong fingers. I knew what I had seen was real. And I knew that those creatures, whatever they were still there, beneath the wooden floor of Grimm's feast, waiting for the next visitor or the next security guard unlucky enough to go in there alone at night. The next morning, when a team of security guards came to check the restaurant, they found nothing unusual. The floor was intact, no bloodstains, no cracks, no signs of any disturbance. But one strange thing happened. When they checked beneath the floor, they found bones, dozens of small bones, like children's bones, buried in the earth. According to archaeologists who were called in, these bones could have been there for hundreds of years, long before Wonderland was built. Grimm's Feast was closed for renovations and never reopened. They built a new restaurant in a different location, with a different theme unrelated to fairy tales. But sometimes, when I pass by that abandoned building on quiet nights, I still hear it. The creaking beneath the wooden floor and the faint, childish laughter echoing from the closed windows. And I know they are still there, beneath the floor, waiting, hungry, patient, waiting for their next meal. Part 10. Every amusement park has a surveillance room, where dozens, sometimes hundreds, of security cameras are connected, monitoring every corner of the grounds. Wonderland was no exception. Our surveillance room was on the second floor of the administration building, a windowless room with 4 walls covered in monitors. By regulation, the surveillance room had to have at least 2 staff working simultaneously 24/7. One person to monitor the screens, the other to respond if a problem occurred. But in reality, on quiet night shifts, only one person was on duty, usually Frank, a retired police officer who was the only one volunteering for night shifts in the surveillance room. No one knew why Frank liked night shifts. Perhaps it was the quiet, perhaps the higher pay, or perhaps, as the rumors in the break room said, because he was the only one who could tolerate what sometimes appeared on the screens at 3:00 a.m. I had heard stories about strange figures appearing in empty areas, about how cameras sometimes turned towards things they shouldn't, about blurry faces that sometimes looked directly into the lens, even though no one was there. I hadn't believed those stories, until that fateful night when I had to fill in for Frank. "Frank's sick," Morrison said over the radio. "You'll have to man the surveillance room tonight." "Me?" I asked, surprised, "but I've never been on duty there." "No one else is available," Morrison replied. "I've called everyone, you're the only one who can cover." I swallowed hard. "Understood, I'll be right there." "And Hartley," Morrison added, his voice lowering, "don't fall asleep. Always keep an eye on the screens." That warning seemed to carry a deeper meaning. But I didn't ask further. I turned off the radio and started walking towards the administration building. That night was a quiet December night, the air cold and crisp. Wonderland had closed at 9:00 p.m., leaving only a few cleaning staff finishing their last tasks of the day. I walked through the main gate, crossed the deserted Central Plaza, and arrived at the administration building, a 3-story building with modern architecture located in the park's east. The surveillance room was at the end of the second-floor corridor, behind a heavy metal door with an electronic lock. I swiped my staff card, hearing a soft click as the door opened. Inside the surveillance room was exactly as I had imagined. A small space, about 20 square meters, with 4 walls covered in monitors. In the center was a large control desk with many buttons, levers, and keyboards. A black swivel chair was placed in front of the control desk, and another chair sat in the corner of the room, presumably for the second person as per regulation. I sat down in the chair in front of the control desk, looking at the monitors displaying images from all over Wonderland. There were 16 main monitors. Each monitor was divided into 4 smaller screens, displaying images from different security cameras. They scanned various areas: the main gate, the central plaza, the amusement area, the food court, and many other places. Everything seemed normal. Cleaning staff were working in the food court, another security guard was patrolling near the lake, and the rest of the park was empty and quiet. Perhaps tonight will be peaceful, I told myself, relaxing in the chair. I began to familiarize myself with the control desk, learning how to switch between cameras, zoom in on images, and adjust camera angles. The system was quite intuitive, and after about an hour, I was quite proficient. The clock struck 1:00 a.m. The cleaning staff had finished their work and left. Only I and a few other security guards remained in all of Wonderland. I glanced at the monitors, making sure everything was still fine. And then I noticed something strange. One of the screens on monitor number 7, a camera in the children's amusement area, had gone out. It only displayed a pitch-black screen with no image. "That's odd," I muttered, pressing the button to check that camera. The system displayed an error message: Camera 27 connection lost. I picked up the radio, intending to report to Morrison, but then stopped. It was just a faulty camera, not an emergency. I could report it in the morning, and the technical team would fix it. I put the radio down, continuing to monitor the other screens, but my gaze kept drifting towards that black screen, as if drawn to it. And then I saw it. A faint light in the black screen, not the usual white light, but a small red dot, like a red star in the night sky. I stared, unsure if I was really seeing it, but the red dot was still there, and it was moving. Not randomly, but purposefully, as if it was scanning the screen. And then another red dot appeared next to it. 2 red dots, spaced apart, moving together. I zoomed in on that screen, trying to see more clearly, and as the image enlarged, I realized what they were. Eyes. A pair of red eyes staring out from the black screen. My heart pounded in my chest. Impossible. No one was in the children's amusement area at this hour, and even if there were, a faulty camera couldn't just display their eyes in the dark. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just a technical glitch. Perhaps the camera wasn't completely disconnected. Maybe the image was just distorted, and those red dots were just faulty pixels. I moved on to checking other screens, trying not to look at the black screen with the red eyes, but I couldn't resist. My gaze kept drifting towards it, as if pulled by an invisible force. And each time I looked, those eyes seemed larger, clearer. No longer faint red dots, but a pair of bright red eyes with pupils as black as abysses, staring directly at me. I knew it was impossible. Cameras only transmitted images one way. It couldn't know I was looking at it. But I had a distinct feeling that those eyes were staring directly at me, watching my every move. I decided to ignore it, focusing on the other screens. The clock struck 2:00 a.m. All other areas were still quiet and empty, and then another screen went out. Then another and another. Quickly and systematically, the screens displaying images from the security cameras began to turn black, one by one, not all at once, but sequentially, as if someone was deliberately turning off each camera. I frantically checked the system, looking for signs of technical problems or power outages. But there were no error messages, no warnings. The system was still operating normally. It was just that the cameras were gradually losing connection. Within 5 minutes, 15 out of the 16 monitors had turned black, leaving only one screen still displaying an image, the camera at the main gate where another security guard was stationed. And on each black screen, a pair of red eyes appeared. Not the same pair of eyes, but different eyes. Large, small, round, elongated. Each pair had its own shape, but all were glowing red and all were staring directly at me. I stood up, backing away from the control desk, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't a technical malfunction, impossible. I picked up the radio, my hands trembling. "Morrison," I called out, my voice hoarse with fear. "Something's wrong with the camera system." Only static replied. The radio wasn't working. I tried again, louder. "Morrison, can you hear me?" Still only static. I put the radio down, looking back at the screens. And then from the surveillance system speaker, a sound emitted. Not a voice or a familiar sound, but a static hiss, like radio interference but structured, as if someone was trying to speak through a bad connection. The static grew louder, clearer, until it began to sound like whispers. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of whispering voices layered on top of each other, forming a grotesque chorus of incomprehensible sounds. and from the vent in the ceiling, a thin wisp of smoke began to drift in. Not smoke from a fire, but a different kind of smoke, thinner, pale blue, with a strange scent like stale tobacco. I tried to open the door to escape, but the door wouldn't open. The electronic lock seemed to have been disabled, not responding when I swiped my card. I turned back to look at the screens and saw that now all of them were pitch black, including the last screen. 16 black screens, each with a pair of red eyes staring at me, and those eyes were changing. They were no longer just eyes. Beneath them, faces began to form. Blurry, pale white faces with wide-open mouths in silent screams. One face, in particular, was clearer than the others. The face of an elderly man with bright red eyes and an eerily familiar expression. "Frank," I whispered, recognizing the colleague I was filling in for. The face didn't respond, just continued to stare with bright red eyes and a wide, open mouth. And then all the screens began to flicker rapidly and intensely, creating a blinding light effect in the dark room. Red, black, red, black, red, black. The flickering pattern repeated with increasing speed. In that flickering light, I saw it, a line of text appearing on the central monitor, glowing bright red against black. "Michael." My heart stopped. How did the system know my name? I had never logged into it. The text vanished, only to be replaced by another line, "We have been waiting for you." And another line, "You have seen us." And the final line, "Now we see you." I backed into a corner of the room, trying to get as far away from the screens as possible. But there was nowhere to hide in this small room. The screens covered every wall, and on each screen, a face was staring at me with bright red eyes. The static from the speaker grew louder, clearer, until it was no longer static but a voice. A distorted voice, as if speaking through a layer of water. "Michael Hartley," the voice echoed, drawing out my name like a sigh. "Who's that?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Who's speaking?" "We have been waiting for you," the voice continued, ignoring my question. "We have watched you through the aquarium, through the cinema, through the essential oil garden, through the arcade corner, through the lake, through the art gallery, through the emergency tunnel, through the mini train, through the haunted restaurant." The voice listed all the places where I had experienced horror at Wonderland, as if it knew all my secrets. "And now," the voice continued, "you have come to us where it all begins." "Where?" I asked, though unsure if I truly wanted to know the answer. "The surveillance room," the voice replied, "where we watch and where we are watched, where the boundary between observer and observed blurs." The screens began to flicker faster, more intensely, creating an epileptic fit of light in the dark room. I had to close my eyes to avoid being blinded. And when I opened my eyes, I saw it. On every screen, no longer faces with red eyes, but images of me. Me standing in the surveillance room, looking at the monitors with horror. But it wasn't me looking into a camera in this room. There were no cameras in the surveillance room. Where were these images coming from? And then I realized, it wasn't images from cameras. It was the perspective of someone looking at me, or rather, something looking at me. On every screen, I saw myself from a different angle. From above, from below, from behind, from impossible camera angles. As if 16 invisible entities were standing around me. Each entity watching me from a different position. "We have watched you," the voice continued. "Now it's your turn to watch us." And then the screens went out, leaving complete darkness. The smoke from the vent stopped pouring out. The static from the speaker fell silent. Only I was left alone in the darkness, with my pounding heart and rapid breathing. I stood there, not daring to move, not daring to breathe loudly, waiting for something to happen next. And then the lights came back on. The screens restarted, displaying normal images from security cameras throughout Wonderland. The door lock emitted a beep, signaling it was unlocked. I rushed out of the room, not daring to look back, ran down the corridor and downstairs, not stopping until I was outside in the cold night air. I stood there, gasping, looking up at the administration building. The lights in the second-floor surveillance room were still on, as if nothing had happened. I picked up my radio, trembling. "Morrison," I called, and this time there was a reply. "Clear, Hartley, what's wrong?" "The surveillance room," I panted. "Something's wrong there." "What did you see?" Morrison asked, his voice sounding genuinely concerned. I stood there, trying to find a way to explain. How could I tell him about the red eyes, about the faces on the screen, about the voice that knew my name and every place I had experienced horror? I'm not sure," I lied, "but I think we should find someone else to man the surveillance room tonight." Morrison was silent for a moment, then said, "I'll call Thompson. You head back to the main security office." I nodded, even though Morrison couldn't see me over the radio. Understood. I started walking towards the main security office, but before I went too far, I turned back to look at the administration building one last time, and I saw it. A face pressed against the second-story surveillance room window. Not Thompson's face or any other security guards, but a pale face with bright red eyes and a wide, open mouth in a silent scream. Just for a moment, then it vanished. But I knew what I had seen. The next day, when I came in for my afternoon shift, I heard that Frank had passed away. He wasn't sick, as Morrison had said. He had died, found in his apartment, sitting in front of a turned-on television with wide-open eyes and a wide-open mouth in a silent scream. According to the police report, he had died of a heart attack. But I knew the truth. I had seen his face on the screen, with bright red eyes and a wide, open mouth. I never worked the surveillance room alone again. No one did. They started strictly enforcing the two-person rule for night shifts. But sometimes, when I pass by the administration building on quiet nights, I still look up at the second-story surveillance room window. And I swear I can see it. A pale face with bright red eyes, looking down, watching. Watching me, watching all of us. Part 11. There are places in Wonderland that even the most seasoned staff only visit when absolutely necessary. Not because they are particularly dangerous or haunted, but because they are too mundane, too unremarkable, making one easily drop their guard. And in Wonderland, dropping your guard can be your last mistake. The basement public restrooms were one of those places. Located beneath the central plaza, this restroom facility was one of the park's oldest, built even before Wonderland officially opened. According to rumors, it used to be the construction workers' bathhouse and was later renovated into public restrooms when the park opened. No one liked going down there, especially at night. The old fluorescent lights always flickered annoyingly. The ancient plumbing system made strange noises at odd hours, and there was always a damp, musty smell, the smell of old concrete and stagnant water, no matter how much the cleaning staff tried to scrub. But what made this place truly scary wasn't its physical flaws, but the stories. Stories of crying sounds emanating from empty toilet stalls, of shadowy figures reflected in the mirrors when no one was there, of how water stains on the floor sometimes formed the shape of hands, fingers reaching towards the exit, as if someone was trying to crawl away. I had avoided that place as much as possible during my time at Wonderland, but that night, I had no other choice. The shower in the staff changing room is broken, Morrison said over the radio. Water's spilling everywhere. You need to go down there and shut off the main valve until the maintenance crew arrives in the morning. Can't anyone else do it? I asked, trying not to let my anxiety show in my voice. Everyone's busy with the leak in the food court, Morrison replied. You're the only one who can do it, Hartley. I sighed, surrendering to fate. Understood. I'll be right down. That night was a cold winter night, with thick fog covering Wonderland, blurring the lights and creating strange shapes in the darkness. I walked through the deserted central plaza, my breath forming small clouds in front of me. The staircase leading down to the basement restrooms was in the corner of the plaza, a narrow passageway with old concrete steps illuminated by weak light bulbs on the walls. I started descending, each step echoing in the silent space. The air grew colder, damper, as I went deeper. The musty smell grew stronger, assaulting my nostrils like an invisible hand. At the bottom of the stairs was a short corridor leading to two doors, one on the left for women, one on the right for men. Between the two doors was a third, smaller door with a staff-only sign. That was the staff changing room and restroom area. I approached that door, took out my key, and unlocked it. The door opened with a long, drawn-out creak, as if protesting being disturbed at this hour. Inside, it was pitch black, only the faint light from an emergency bulb in the corner of the room. I flicked the main light switch, and the fluorescent lights on the ceiling began to glow, flickering a few times before stabilizing. The staff changing room was a small space with 2 rows of metal lockers along the walls, a long bench in the middle, and a shower area at the back with 4 shower stalls separated by plastic partitions. And just as Morrison had said, one of the showers was broken, water continuously spraying from the pipe, overflowing onto the floor and spreading throughout the room. The floor was already about 2 centimeters deep in water, and it was slowly reaching the locker area. Great, I muttered, taking off my jacket and hanging it on a hook near the door. It was both cold and wet. I knew where the main water shutoff valve was, in a small alcove near the shower area, covered by a removable metal plate. I waded through the puddle of water, careful not to slip, and reached the shower area. Water was still spraying from the pipe, creating a fine mist in the confined space. Combined with the flickering fluorescent lights, it created a ghostly scene, as if I were in a horror movie. I approached the alcove, removing the metal plate covering the valve. Inside was a network of pipes and valves, with a large red valve in the center, the main water shutoff. I turned that valve clockwise, feeling it resist under my hand. It was old and partially rusted, making it difficult to turn. But after a few attempts, it finally budged, and the stream of water from the shower began to weaken until only a few drops remained. "That's done," I sighed, wiping sweat from my forehead. I replaced the metal plate and began to look around, assessing the damage. The floor was flooded, but thankfully, most of the lockers seemed to be dry. I needed to clear the water before leaving, otherwise it would cause more damage. I noticed a mop and bucket in the corner of the room, probably left by the cleaning staff. I decided to use them to clear the water. As I mopped the floor, I noticed a large mirror mounted on the wall opposite the shower area. It was an old mirror with a tarnished metal frame and a surface clouded by steam and age. I looked into the mirror and saw my reflection, faint and distorted through the layer of steam. I looked like a ghost, a blurry version of myself. As I continued mopping, I couldn't help but glance into the mirror every few minutes. There was something about it that drew my attention, as if it was trying to tell me something. And then I noticed it. On the mirror's surface, besides my reflection, there were damp handprints, as if someone had placed wet hands on the mirror and left their mark. At first, I didn't think much of it. Perhaps it was the handprints of some staff member who had used the changing room earlier. But then I realized something strange. Those handprints weren't there when I first entered the room. They appeared later, while I was mopping the floor. I stopped, staring at the mirror. Impossible. No one had entered the room after me. The door was still closed, and I hadn't heard it open. "Is anyone there?" I called out. My voice echoed in the empty space. No reply, just the dripping water from the now-closed shower. I approached the mirror, observing the handprints on it. They were adult handprints with long, slender fingers. Not my handprints. My hands were larger and coarser. A pungent smell of disinfectant hit my nostrils, the smell of chlorine and chemicals, as if someone had just sprayed a large amount of cleaner in the room. But I didn't see any spray bottles, and the scent seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. The dripping water from the shower became more regular, clearer, like a heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick asterisk, slow and patient. I touched a handprint on the mirror, feeling the cold surface beneath my fingertips. Nothing happened, just a water streak. "It's just water," I told myself, trying to calm down. Nothing scary. But as I was about to withdraw my hand, the mirror began to vibrate. Gently at first, then more violently, as if a small earthquake was shaking the wall. I recoiled, watching in horror as the mirror shook violently, creating a grinding metallic sound against the concrete. And then it stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy silence. I stood there, gasping, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for something to happen next. The mirror now reflected a different image. Not me standing in the changing room, but a different version of me. A version looking with extreme panic and fear. I could see my reflected mouth open in a silent scream, even though I wasn't screaming. My reflected eyes were wide with indescribable terror, even though I was just looking with confusion and worry. My reflection was no longer just a reflection. It had become a separate entity, with its own movements and expressions. And then the impossible happened. A hand, not my hand, but another hand, pale and gaunt, appeared from behind my reflection in the mirror. It placed itself on my reflection's shoulder. Long, slender fingers gripped the shirt tightly. I felt it. The cold sensation of those fingers on my shoulder, even though no one was standing behind me in the real room. I spun around, looking behind me, but there was only empty space. When I turned back to the mirror, that hand was still there, gripping my reflection's shoulder. And now I could see its owner, a blurry figure standing behind my reflection, a head taller than me, its face obscured by shadow. "Who?" I stammered, backing away from the mirror. "What?" The figure in the mirror didn't answer, just stood there, its hand still gripping my reflection's shoulder. My reflection was now crying, red tears streaming down its face, even though my eyes were dry. I backed further away until my back hit the opposite wall. I couldn't take my eyes off the mirror, off the horrifying scene unfolding within it. And then the figure in the mirror began to move. It stepped forward until it was standing right next to my reflection. Its pale hand was no longer on my reflection's shoulder, but was reaching out towards the mirror's surface. Long, slender fingers touched the mirror's surface from within, creating small ripples as if the mirror was a body of water. The fingers began to push, trying to penetrate the mirror's surface from the reflected world into the real world. I stood there, frozen in horror, watching the long, pale fingers gradually push through the mirror's surface. Part of them was already in the real world. Impossible, I thought. This cannot be happening. I gathered all my courage and ran towards the exit door. I had to get out of here, had to get out of this room. As I ran past the mirror, I glanced at it one last time and saw the entire hand had penetrated the mirror's surface, reaching out into real space, fingers wiggling as if beckoning me. I didn't stop. I ran to the door, grabbed the handle, and pulled hard. The door wouldn't open. I pulled harder, shook the handle, pushed my shoulder against the door, but it wouldn't budge, as if it had been locked from the outside. "Help me!" I screamed, pounding on the door. "Is anyone out there? Help me!" No reply, only the dripping water from the shower. Tick, tick, tick asterisk, regular as the beat of an invisible heart. I turned back, my back pressed against the door, and looked towards the mirror. The figure was gone. So was my reflection. Instead, the mirror now only reflected the empty room as if I wasn't standing there. But the hand was still there, no longer in the mirror, but fully in the real world. Reaching out from the mirror's surface like a grotesque limb growing from the wall, and it was moving. The fingers wiggled, beckoning me closer. "No," I whispered, pressing against the door. "No, no." The dripping water stopped, and a heavy, oppressive silence enveloped the room. And then from within the mirror, a sound emitted, a soft whisper, like a breath, but clear in the silent space. "Michael." I stood there, frozen in horror. How did it know my name? "Michael Hartley," the whisper continued, drawing out my name like a sigh. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Who are you?" "I am the one who has seen," the whisper replied. "The one who has seen all you have seen. At the aquarium, at the cinema, at the essential oil garden, at the arcade corner, at the lake, at the art gallery, at the emergency tunnel, at the mini train, at the haunted restaurant, at the surveillance room." The whisper listed all the places where I had experienced horror at Wonderland, just as the voice in the surveillance room had done. "And now," the whisper continued, "you have come to me where it all ends." "Where?" I asked, though unsure if I truly wanted to know the answer. "The mirror," the whisper replied. "The boundary between this world and the other where anything is possible." The hand from the mirror was still wiggling, beckoning me closer. But now it was no longer just a hand. An arm was slowly emerging, followed by a shoulder, then a part of a face, all pale and blurry as if made of mist and light. "Come, Michael," the whisper invited. "Come to me. I will show you the wonders on the other side of the mirror." I shook my head, trying to find another way out, but there were no windows in the basement changing room, and the only exit was locked. I looked around, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. I saw the mop I had used to clean the floor and grabbed it. "Stay away from me," I said, raising the mop like a staff. "I don't know who you are, but I don't want any trouble." The whisper turned into a giggle. A soft, clear sound, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Oh, Michael," it said, "don't you understand? You've been in trouble since you first stepped into Wonderland. You just didn't know it." The creature from the mirror was now halfway out, a thin, pale body with one arm outstretched and half a face revealed. The other half of its body was still stuck in the mirror, as if caught between two worlds. I could see that face more clearly now. A face that was neither male nor female, with delicate features and eyes. No eyes, only two deep black hollows where eyes should have been. "What are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I am the observer," the creature replied. "The watcher, the recorder. I have been here since before Wonderland was built, and I will be here after it is gone." The creature continued to pull itself out of the mirror, but seemed to struggle. Its lower half was still trapped in the mirror, as if an invisible force was pulling it back. "Help me, Michael," the creature pleaded, reaching its pale arm towards me. "Help me out, and in return I will explain everything about Wonderland, about the things you have seen, about why you are still here after all that has happened." I recoiled, shaking my head. "No. Whatever you're trying to do, I don't want to be a part of it." "Oh, but you already are, Michael," the creature said, its voice growing colder. "Since your first night at the aquarium, you have become a part of Wonderland, like me, like all of us." "All of us?" I asked, feeling a new fear rise. "Who else?" The creature smiled, a smile that didn't reach the black hollows of its face. all those who have come and never truly left, all those who have seen too much, all those who have become a part of this place. And then from within the mirror, other hands began to appear. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of hands, all reaching out, all wiggling, all beckoning me closer. I watched in utter horror as the mirror's surface came alive with outstretched hands, partially revealed faces, blurry figures trying to escape. "Come here, Michael," the first creature invited. "Join us. Become a part of Wonderland forever." "No," I screamed, raising the mop and striking the mirror hard. The sound of shattering glass echoed in the confined space, and the mirror broke into hundreds of pieces, falling to the floor with a clatter. The screams of the creature and of hundreds of other creatures behind it erupted as they were pulled back into the other world. The broken pieces of the mirror were no longer a gateway between two worlds. The screaming lasted for a few seconds, then fell silent, leaving a heavy stillness. I stood there, gasping, looking at the pile of broken mirror shards on the floor. Each shard reflected a part of the room, but no sign of the creature or the outstretched hands. And then I heard it, the sound of the door lock opening. I turned to see the doorknob turning. The door opened, and Morrison stood there, looking worried. "Hartley, are you all right?" he asked. I heard a crash. I looked at him, not knowing what to say. How could I explain about the creature from the mirror? About the hundreds of outstretched hands? About the whispers that knew my name and every place I had experienced horror? "The mirror broke," I said, pointing to the broken pieces on the floor. "I didn't mean to." Morrison looked at the broken pieces, then back at me. "It's all right, I'll report it to maintenance in the morning. Did you manage to shut off the water valve?" I nodded, still feeling dazed after what had just happened. "Yes, the water stopped flowing." "Good, head back to the main security office. Your shift is almost over." I nodded, hastily grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. But before leaving, I glanced back at the broken pieces one last time, and I saw it. In a small shard, an eye staring up. Not a human eye, but a deep black hollow, like the eyes of the creature from the mirror. I hurried out, closing the door behind me, and followed Morrison up the stairs, out of the basement, into the cold night air. The basement restrooms were closed for renovation afterward. They installed new plumbing, replaced the floor tiles, and of course, replaced the broken mirror. But I never went down there alone again, and whenever I had to go, I never looked in the mirror. Never. Because I knew that behind that reflective surface, creatures were waiting creatures who were once human, who had seen too much at Wonderland and became a part of it. And I knew that one day, if I wasn't careful, I would become one of them. Part 12. I still remember my last night shift in March vividly. Wonderland had been closed for maintenance for the past 3 months and was set to reopen tomorrow. Everything had been cleaned, repaired, and prepared for the new season. The park looked almost perfect under the moonlight, quiet, clean, and waiting for the thousands of visitors who would pour in tomorrow. My task that night was simple: check the main gate and the lighting system, ensuring everything worked properly for opening day. Morrison said it would be a quick check. Afterward, I could go home early. I never imagined it would be one of the most terrifying nights of my entire time at Wonderland. That night was the last night of March, when spring began to awaken from its winter slumber. Wonderland was set to reopen tomorrow after 3 months of closure for maintenance and upgrades. Tonight, I had one final task: check the main gate and the lighting system, ensuring everything was working properly for opening day. "Just a quick check," Morrison said over the radio. "Then you can go home early." "Understood," I replied, starting to walk towards the main gate. Wonderland's main gate was an architectural masterpiece, a colossal structure of steel and glass with 2 towering spires on either side and a grand archway in the middle. By day, it sparkled under the sun, welcoming thousands of eager visitors. By night, it became a dark, imposing mass against the sky, silent and ominous. I approached the gate, took out my key, and opened the control room door. A small room located at the base of the right tower, where the control panel for the lighting and sound system was housed. Inside, it was pitch black, with only the faint light from the LEDs on the control panel. I flipped the light switch, and the small room lit up under the fluorescent lights. The control panel was a complex network of switches, buttons, and display screens. I had been trained to use it, but usually it was the technical team's job, not security's. I began to check each system one by one according to the list Morrison had given me. The main lighting system worked normally. The sound system worked normally. The alarm system worked normally. Everything seemed to be in order. I made a note on the checklist, ready to report to Morrison that everything was ready for opening day. As I was checking the security camera system at the main gate, I noticed something strange on the monitor. A figure standing outside the gate, a tall, thin man in a black suit standing motionless, looking into Wonderland. "That's odd," I muttered, adjusting the camera to see more clearly. As the camera zoomed in, I noticed something strange about the man. He was too still, not just standing still, but completely motionless, like a statue, with no sign of breathing, no slightest movement of his body. And although the camera had night vision capabilities, I couldn't clearly see his face. It seemed blurred, as if a thin layer of fog surrounded it. I picked up the radio, intending to report to Morrison, but then stopped. Perhaps it was just a curious visitor checking out the park before opening day. Nothing alarming. I decided to go outside and check. I locked the control room and went out to the main gate. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. The main gate was silent, not a sound. I looked out and no one was there. The man had vanished. Perhaps he had left while I was coming out. I sighed, preparing to go back in to report to Morrison, but stopped when I heard it. Breathing. Not my breathing, but a cold, rapid breath echoing right next to my right ear. I spun around, my heart pounding. No one was there, just the cold night air and the darkness. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. No reply, only the faint rustling of leaves in the distant trees. I shook my head, trying to calm myself. "It's just my imagination," I told myself. "Just the wind." I started walking towards the main security office, wanting to end my shift and go home. But with every step, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. The wind whistled through the gate, carrying the smell of dampness and tobacco smoke, a strange scent that didn't belong here. I stopped, listening. The breathing sounded again, right behind me, almost at the nape of my neck. I didn't dare turn around. A part of me didn't want to know what was standing behind me, breathing down my neck. I continued walking faster, almost running. The breathing followed, also faster, keeping pace with me no matter how fast I went. When I was near the main security office, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see what was following me. I stopped and slowly turned around. Nothing was there. No one, just the empty road behind me, dimly lit by old-fashioned streetlights. I breathed a sigh of relief, but then froze as I realized something. The breathing was still there, right next to my right ear, even though no one was standing there. And then I felt it. A presence, not with my eyes or ears, but with another sense deeper. As if the air around me was thickening, forming an invisible shape. I slowly raised my hand and felt a rush of cold air, much colder than the surrounding night air. It moved, dodging my hand as if it had a will of its own. "Who? What?" I stammered, feeling cold sweat run down my spine despite the low night temperature. No reply, just the steady, cold breathing almost touching my skin. I backed away, feeling my heart pound in my chest. Many strange things had happened at Wonderland during my time here, but never had I felt so watched, as if an invisible entity was studying me, observing my every reaction. I took out my radio, my hands trembling. "Morrison," I called. "I think there's something near the main gate." Only static replied. The radio wasn't working. I looked down and saw something strange. The radio was still on, the indicator light still glowing, but no sound was coming out, only a silent void, as if something was blocking the signal. I decided to run to the main security office. I turned and started running. As I ran past a small puddle of water on the road, under the streetlight, I saw something unbelievable. In the puddle, I saw not just my reflection, but another person's. The tall, thin man in the black suit, standing right behind me. I spun around, but no one was there, only empty air and the breathing still echoing in my ear. I looked back at the puddle, and the reflection was still there. The man in the black suit, standing right behind me, even though in reality no one was there. I could see his face more clearly now. A pale, gaunt face with empty eyes and a mouth slightly open in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice hoarse with fear. No reply from the empty air behind me, but in the puddle the man's reflection moved. His lips moved as if speaking, though no sound came out. I tried to read his lips but couldn't understand. It wasn't a language I knew. And then I noticed another strange thing. While the man's reflection was clearly standing behind me, his hands were not at his sides as usual. They were reaching towards me, towards my neck. I felt it, a cold sensation on the back of my neck, as if invisible fingers were touching my skin. I didn't wait another second. I ran as fast as I could towards the security office, not daring to look back, not daring to check if the man's reflection was running after me. The breathing still followed, more rapid, as if the invisible man was trying to keep up with me. I ran through the central plaza, through the amusement area, through the food court, to the main security office. I pushed the door open, burst inside, and slammed the door shut behind me. Morrison was sitting at his desk, looking up with surprise as I rushed in. "Hartley, what's wrong?" he asked, standing up. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I stood there, gasping, my heart pounding in my chest. How could I explain about the invisible man, about the breathing in my ear, about the reflection in the puddle? There's someone," I panted. "Near the main gate," Morrison frowned. "You saw someone in the park, an intruder?" "I'm not sure," I said, trying to slow my racing heart. "I saw him on the security camera, but when I went out to check, no one was there." "Perhaps it was just a glitch with the camera," Morrison said reassuringly, "or perhaps they had left when you went out." I nodded, not wanting to talk about the breathing or the reflection. Morrison would think I was delusional. "Perhaps," I reluctantly agreed. "You look tired, Hartley," Morrison said, patting my shoulder. "Why don't you go home and rest? Your shift is over, and tomorrow will be a busy day." I nodded, grateful to be going home early. "Thanks, boss." I grabbed my jacket and backpack, preparing to leave. As I opened the office door, I felt cold air rush in, and with it, that familiar smell of dampness and tobacco smoke. "Do you smell anything?" I asked Morrison, unable to help myself. Morrison looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Smell what?" The smell of tobacco smoke and dampness." Morrison took a deep breath, then shook his head. "I don't smell anything, Hartley. Perhaps you really need to rest." I nodded weakly and left the office. Outside, Wonderland was silent and still, only the faint wind and distant insect sounds. I walked towards the staff parking lot where my old car was waiting. As I passed the main gate one last time, I stopped, looking up at its colossal structure. The breathing was gone. Perhaps the creature, whatever it was, had given up, or perhaps it only existed within the park, unable to follow me outside. I breathed a sigh of relief, continuing towards the parking lot. Tomorrow would be a new day, an opening day with thousands of eager visitors and joyful laughter. No place for ghosts and breathing in a wonderland bustling with light and music. I opened the car door, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The radio automatically turned on, playing a news report about tomorrow's weather, warm and sunny, perfect for the park's opening day. I drove out of the parking lot, through the staff gate, and started heading home. The road was deserted at this hour, only my car and the vast darkness. I opened the window to let the cool night air blow in, dissipating the tension from the strange shift. And then I heard it, breathing, not from the back seat, which I had checked before getting in, not from the passenger seat beside me, which was empty, but from the radio, interspersed with the news anchor's voice, a faint, cold, rapid breath. I quickly turned off the radio, my heart pounding. Silence enveloped the car, broken only by the engine's hum and the sound of tires on the road. I breathed a sigh of relief, trying to calm myself. "It's just static," I told myself. "Just my imagination." I continued driving, trying to focus on the road ahead, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something had changed. I glanced in the rearview mirror and my heart stopped. In the blurry backseat, but unmistakably, was a figure. The man in the black suit with a pale face and empty eyes. He was looking directly at me through the mirror with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I screamed, slamming on the brakes, causing the car to skid across the road. I spun around, looking into the back seat. No one was there, only empty seats and darkness. I turned back to look in the rearview mirror, and he was still there, still looking at me, still smiling. I knew this wasn't an illusion, not imagination. This was something from Wonderland, something that had followed me out. And then I heard the whisper, not from the turned-off radio, but from the very air around me. "Michael Hartley," the whisper echoed, drawing out my name like a sigh. The man in the mirror smiled wider, his mouth opening unnaturally, too wide for a human face. His breathing was cold, rapid, filling the space inside the car. I pressed hard on the gas pedal. The car sped off into the night. But no matter how fast I drove, the breathing still followed. The face in the mirror was still there, still staring, still smiling. I knew I couldn't escape it. This was no longer Wonderland, but the creature from that park had followed me home. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, turning into the small road leading to my house. My hands were trembling, my heart racing, cold sweat running down my spine. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why did you follow me home?" No reply, only the breathing growing closer, colder. I parked the car in front of my house, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, trying to regain my composure. The breathing had stopped. The face in the mirror had vanished. Perhaps it had gone. I got out of the car, locked the door, and hurried into the house. I locked the door, turned on all the lights, checked every corner, every room. Nothing, no one, I was alone. I breathed a sigh of relief, almost laughing at my foolishness. Perhaps it was all just an illusion due to fatigue. Perhaps I needed rest, as Morrison had said. I went into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away all memories of the strange night at Wonderland. As I looked up into the mirror, the eyes staring back at me were not my eyes. They were the eyes of the man in the black suit, empty, deep, containing nothing but darkness. And my mouth was no longer my mouth, but a twisted smile, too wide, with too many sharp teeth. I screamed, backing away from the mirror, but the reflection didn't follow. It stood there, still looking at me, still smiling, as if it had a will of its own. And then from within the mirror, a hand reached out. The hand of the reflection, but not my hand. It was longer, thinner, with unnaturally elongated fingers and sharp black nails. That hand reached out, crossing the boundary between the mirror world and the real world towards my neck. I wanted to run, but my feet felt frozen in place. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my throat. The cold hand touched my skin, and with it, the final breath, not mine, but the creature's. A long, satisfied sigh, as if it had found what it had been seeking for so long. I don't remember how I got home. I just remember waking up the next morning, finding myself lying on the living room floor, my body aching and cold. The front door was still open, as if I had been too panicked to close it. I slowly got up, my head pounding. The images from last night flooded back. The man in the black suit, the cold breathing in my ear, the reflection in the mirror with eyes that were not mine. I looked in the bathroom mirror, half expecting to see that strange face again. But only I stared back, eyes dark-rimmed, skin pale, but still me. I breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps it was all just a nightmare, an illusion due to fatigue. I had been overworked these past few days preparing for opening day. I showered, changed, and prepared for work. Today was Wonderland's opening day, and I had to be there. No matter what happened last night, I still had a responsibility to my job. As I drove to the park, the memories of last night gradually faded like a dream upon waking. The morning sun dispelled all darkness, and Wonderland before me looked bright and vibrant under the sun. Hundreds of visitors were already queuing at the gate, eager to enter. Cheerful music played from the speakers, and lively chatter filled the air. I parked my car in the staff parking lot and entered the park through the side gate. Morrison was already there, radio in hand, coordinating the security guards. "Hartley," he called when he saw me, "you look much better than last night. Had a good rest?" I nodded, not wanting to talk about what had happened. "Yes, thanks, boss." "Good, you'll be on duty at the children's amusement area this morning. Busy but light work." I accepted the assignment and started walking to my position. As I passed the main gate, I couldn't help but stop, looking up at the colossal structure that had been the source of terror last night. Under the sunlight, it was just a beautiful piece of architecture, nothing scary. No man in a black suit, no cold breathing. But just as I was about to continue, a cold gust of wind suddenly blew through, carrying that familiar smell of dampness and tobacco smoke. And for a fleeting moment, I heard it, breathing right next to my right ear. I spun around, my heart pounding. No one was there, only the stream of visitors pouring into the park. The breathing vanished as quickly as it appeared. Perhaps it was just my imagination. Or perhaps, I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. I had a job to do. I couldn't let fear control me. I continued to my area, blending into the bustling atmosphere of opening day. But deep down, I knew something had changed. Wonderland was no longer the same. And sometimes, when no one was looking, I still felt it, an invisible presence beside me, watching my every move, breathing softly in my ear. The final breath. Not my final breath at Wonderland, but the first breath of something that had chosen me and would never leave me alone. I continued my work at Wonderland, but now I never went anywhere alone, especially at night when darkness fell and the cold breathing was clearer than ever. "I don't understand," I said, shaking my head. "I don't know anything, I'm just a security guard." "No, Michael, you are more than that. You are the observer, the recorder, the storyteller. You are the keeper of Wonderland's secrets." I didn't understand what the creature meant. I had never told anyone about the things I had seen at Wonderland. I had never recorded them. I just tried to forget, tried to live a normal life outside the park. I don't tell anyone, I said. I don't record anything. Oh, but you have, Michael, the whisper replied with a hint of satisfaction in its voice. In your mind, in your memories, in the stories you tell yourself every night as you try to understand what happened. I didn't know what to say. The creature was right. I had relived those experiences hundreds of times in my mind, trying to find meaning, trying to understand what I had seen. And now, the whisper continued, it's time to end the story, it's time for the final breath. I felt a presence behind me, not with my eyes or ears, but with a deeper sense, a presence cold, ancient, and familiar. I slowly turned around, and this time I saw him, the man in the black suit standing just a few steps from me. He was no longer blurry or semi-invisible. He was completely clear, completely real. I could see his face more clearly now. An old face, but ageless, with deep-set eyes containing the wisdom and sorrow of thousands of years. A face that had witnessed the birth and death of countless worlds, countless souls. "Will you kill me?" I asked, my voice hoarse with fear. The man shook his head in almost gentle gesture. "No, Michael, I don't kill anyone, I only collect when the time comes." "Has my time come?" I asked, feeling a strange acceptance replacing my fear. The man smiled, a genuine smile this time, reaching his eyes and softening the rigid lines of his face. "No, Michael, not yet. I merely came to introduce myself, so you know I am always there, always watching, always waiting." I looked at him, confused. "But why? Why me?" "Because you have seen," the man replied. "You have seen things most people cannot see. You have looked into the cracks between worlds and not been afraid. You have faced the creatures from the other side and survived to tell the tale." The man stepped closer, and I felt no fear. There was something about him, a familiarity, a sense that we had met many times before. "You are the storyteller, Michael," the man said, his voice deep and resonant. "You are the keeper of memories, the recorder of the unexplainable. And one day, when your story ends, I will come to collect it, to ensure it is not forgot." I stood there, feeling a strange peace wash over me, as if I finally understood a part of the larger picture, a part of the meaning behind all the strange things I had experienced. "And now," the man said, taking a step back, "I must go. There are many more stories to collect, many more souls to guide. But I will see you again, Michael Hartley, when it is time for the final breath." The man turned and started walking down the road. His tall, thin figure gradually merged with the darkness. But before disappearing completely, he stopped and turned back to look at me one last time. "Keep telling the stories, Michael," he said. "Keep recording, keep remembering, because in a world of forgotten creatures, the storyteller is the most important one." And then he vanished, leaving me alone on the dark road with a jumble of thoughts and emotions. I stood there for a long time, looking at where the man had disappeared. Then I turned to look at my car, still parked far down the road. I started walking back, no longer feeling afraid. Perhaps I should have been afraid, but after all I had experienced at Wonderland, the encounter with the man in the black suit seemed almost normal. When I reached my car, I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. No sign of the man, no breathing, no whispers, only the serene silence of a spring night. I started the engine, and this time the radio didn't automatically turn on. I drove home in silence, thinking about all that had happened, about all that I had seen and heard. When I arrived home, a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, I parked the car and went inside. I turned on the lights, looking around my familiar living room with its old furniture and cheap paintings on the walls. I went to my desk, opened the top drawer, and took out a new blank notebook. I had bought it a few months ago, intending to write a diary, but had never started. I sat down, picked up a pen, and began to write. "My name is Michael Hartley, and I am a security guard at Wonderland, the world's most famous amusement park. These are my stories, the things I have seen, the creatures I have met, and the secrets I have uncovered." I wrote all night, recording everything from my first night at the aquarium to the encounter with the man in the black suit on the dark road. I left out no detail, softened no horror, tried not to explain the inexplicable. I simply recounted truthfully and fully what I had experienced. As the first rays of dawn shone through the window, I put down my pen, looking at the written pages. Perhaps no one would believe these stories. Perhaps they would be dismissed as products of a tired mind or an overactive imagination. But I knew the truth, and now I also knew my role. I was the storyteller, the recorder, the keeper of Wonderland secrets. And one day, when my final breath echoes, the man in the black suit will come to collect my story, to ensure it is not forgotten. But until then, I will continue to work at Wonderland. I will continue to face the horrors hidden beneath its dazzling facade. I will continue to survive, and I will continue to record, because that is what I must do. Because that is why I am still here.